Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Broccoli Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes Frankenstein's Monster. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It's raining, but it always seems to be raining. At least, it always seems to be raining when Taoya is around to see it. Shivering, he drew his flimsy and soaked hoodie around himself tighter, stumbling as he looked for some place that might be warm. But there was no way in hell he would use his quirk. He'd rather die than do that. With a full body shudder, he hunched his shoulders, his chin nearly touching his chest as he looked for something, anything that could be better than this, or could at least keep some of the wind out. He coughed, the sound wet in the action racking his body with spasms as he tried to draw in a full breath. His hands shook as he tried to wipe the water from his face, with one hand out to feel his way around. He all but fell into the alleyway, grime sticking to his skin just from being close to the filth. For a minute, he just stood there, bracing himself against the wall with one hand as his vision swam back and forth in front of him. He needed to get somewhere warmer than this fast, or this would be it for him. And wouldn't that be just what he needed? Dying at 27 in an alley in Hasu. He slumped against the wall, bricks wet and slimy from the rain as he spotted his saving grace. Thank fuck, he muttered, nearly passing out before he could stagger over to the dumpster that had been haphazardly jammed in the back of the alley beside a dark metal door. With another wet cough, he pushed up the lid, pulling himself into the metal box with shaking arms, the lid slamming down above him. It was warm and weirdly humid, but at least the crushing darkness was better than the pouring rain. Taking a minute to breathe, Taoya rummaged in his pockets, pulling out a lighter and a crushed box of cigarettes, peeling off his soaked hoodie. He resisted the urge to just let his quirk warm him up. If he closed his eyes, he wouldn't have to see it. He could keep himself from panicking, couldn't he? With shaking and numb fingers, he picked up his lighter and took out a cigarette. But what he saw when he flicked the lighter made bile rise in his guts as he screamed. A sound cut short as he slapped his own hand over his mouth. He had thought the smell was just from the piles of garbage and rotting food, but he couldn't begin to believe how wrong he was. Dropping the lighter, Taoya scrambled to pick it back up, not wanting to be left in the dark with that. A twisted and crumpled form, dressed in a tracksuit and ratty tennis shoes, their skin a dull color with mottled bruises covering every inch he could see. Taoya couldn't breathe, panic settling in his mind. This was bad. His fingerprints were all over everything. There was a dead kid, and he hadn't been on the run long enough for people to not be looking for him. Oh fuck, this isn't good. They would put him away for this. He couldn't go to jail, he'd die in there. Oh shit, oh no, oh god, this is bad, this is so bad. He fisted his free hand in his hair, muttering words that even he couldn't understand to himself. Desperate to leave, he stood, hitting his head on the dumpster lid and knocking himself back to where he had started. He dropped his lighter again, leaving him with nothing but his panic. But what he heard in the darkness nearly knocked the breath out of his lungs. Snap! Dusty purple flames jumped to life in front of his face, and the crumpled corpse sat up, turning to glare at him with its one visible eye. With a voice that was raspy from disuse, the corpse snarled and hissed around its fangs, a forked tongue darting out as it angrily lisped, "If you don't shut the fuck up right now, I'm going to kill you." Yeah, you, oh my god, what the fuck? What the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck? Taoya picked his cigarette up, desperate for the nicotine, only to have it plucked out of his mouth by the previously thought dead kid in front of him. Hey, hold on. The kid rolled his eyes, lighting the cigarette with the dusty purple flames on their left hand. What? They snapped, narrowing their one visible eye when they saw the way Taoya leaned away from the fire with each pop and snap. You got a problem with me? Look around. You're in a dumpster. You have bigger issues than me taking your cigarette. Taoya pulled his knees up to his chest, trying to catch his breath as each thing that was said sent him reeling. What the fuck is happening? He muttered, watching the kid try to straighten the 60-degree bend in the cigarette before giving up and lifting it to their lips. Then it clicked. Taoya knew that face, had seen it staring down at him from missing posters and kidnapping reports on the news. The hair was green now, and they only had one eye, but he knew that face. Wait a minute, you're that kid who was murdered last year. You got me, I'm a talking corpse. The kid sighed, taking a drag on his stolen cigarette only to cough the smoke back out, forked tongue darting rapidly through the haze. Ugh, is this a fucking pyramid? Disgusting. But he took another drag, a look of irritated disgust on his face the entire time. Blowing a thick cloud of smoke into Taoya's face, the talking corpse gestured to his uncovered burns with their stolen cigarette. So, what's your deal? You're what, 20-something? 25-ish, maybe more. Clothes not ripped, but stained and scuffed. Those burns look old, so that's not why you're on the run. Family problems. Taoya flinched, trying to cover his burns on his face and arms with his hands before he gave up and just pulled his knees tighter to his chest. Well, waving away their own question, the corpse interrupted, "Save it, I actually don't give a fuck." Reaching under himself, the teen pulled out a crushed box, shaking it in Taoya's direction. You want some dumpster fries? No, I really don't, Taoya muttered, his teeth chattering as the rush of adrenaline began to fade. He stared at the corpse, realizing that what he had thought was a gaping hole where the missing eye should be was just covered by a plain black eye patch. More for me then, the teen shrugged, opening the box and shaking the stale fries right into his mouth. Speaking through a mouthful of garbage fries, he continued speaking, spraying chunks of potatoes and salt as he did. Name's Midoriya. What's yours? Without missing a beat, he shook his head, green hair falling in his face. Never mind, don't care. Taoya chose his words carefully, finally settling in a pseudonym to use the rest of his life. You can call me Dabai. Midoriya nodded, his lopsided grin showing off his too long and too thin fangs. Fake name, respect for that. The kid set about brushing fry crumbs off themselves, unzipping their tracksuit top to reveal a stained and tattered sleeveless t-shirt. Wiping his mouth on his sleeve, the kid ignored the way Dabai flinched as he reached towards him and grabbed the soaked hoodie from behind the other. It's not a fake name. Taoya shrunk back, knowing he was protesting just a little too loudly for someone who was supposed to be being honest. He hung his head, shoulders slumping. Whatever, you found me out. Looking away, Taoya tried to speak but was cut off before he could get his words out. Pleth, you think my real name is Midoriya? No way, that's the fakest name of all time. Midoriya sorted derisively, shoving more dumpster fries into his mouth. Ignoring Dabai's look of disgust, he continued, talking with his mouth full. Fake names are the only real names you got, he said as he pulled off his tracksuit top. Taoya froze in place, his mind grinding to a halt as he tried to process what he had just heard. What was he even being told right now? Those words didn't make any sense. What? He stared, watching Midoriya with confusion. How the hell did a kid get a tattoo? On their right forearm was an orange shark with black stripes, swimming in gray-blue smoke. With the flickering light from the purple flames on his left shoulder, it almost looked alive. Midoriya let the flames on his left hand travel up to his shoulder and began to wring the water out of Dabai's hoodie, his right hand taking on a metallic sheen as steam raised from the soaked fabric. Rivulets of water began to run down his left arm, hissing and releasing steam where the skin was still hot from the fire. You know, the name you choose shows how you think. Oh, Taoya shivered, watching dry patches bloom into existence across his hoodie as Midoriya fell into silence. Why was he being so kind to him? Unless he could see what he saw every day in the mirror. A nearly lifeless corpse dragging itself around until it falls apart, not even knowing it was dead yet. How long had he been that corpse now? A month, a year, 2, more. He didn't even know anymore. It had been so long now, he was starting to forget the reason he had left. He was tired. Tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending to be what he wasn't. Tired of being. He was just so tired. Shoulders shaking, he buried his face in his hands, trying to push back the tears he knew would be coming. Why couldn't he just keep a handle on his emotions? Why couldn't he just be in control of himself? Why couldn't he just stop? Ugh, crying. Midoriya tightened his grasp on the dried hoodie, turning his gaze away from Dabai and his tears. Holding out the hoodie, he hissed, forked tongue flicking out. Here, I just dried it, so cry in that Otoma thing. Taoya draped the dry hoodie over his shoulders, the heat of the fabric doing almost nothing to chase the chill out of his skin. He wiped at his eyes, trying to slow the flow of tears. Midoriya settled back where had been before, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Sorry, I'm bad with emotions. According to everyone I know, I don't have them. Kinda wish that was me. Right now, Taoya mumbled. Then he wouldn't be in this mess. He'd be worse off, back in that nightmare of a home, but he wouldn't care about it. Midoriya narrowed his uncovered eye, folding his mismatched hands over his lap. He shook his head, a pensive look on his face when he muttered, No, you don't. You really don't. Once those words were said, the silence fell over them, sharp and crystalline, with the feeling that speaking would shatter it into a million deadly razor shards. The quiet was pierced every so often by the crackles of dusty purple flames and Taoya's sniffling, each interruption lessening the edge of the silence a little more. The silence finally softened and thinned like a well-worn cloth. Midoriya let his words cut through it, severing the threads. So, are you a skater or a faker? Taoya blinked the last of the tears out of his eyes, staring at Midoriya in confusion. Did the kid only have freckles on one side of his face? What was up with that? A what or a what? Midoriya rolled his eyes, exaggerating the movement to the point Taoya wondered if he was going to break his own neck in the process. How the hell have you been running and not ... Ugh. He shook his head, cutting himself off in the middle of his own reprimanding. Skater, living on the edge of society, getting fake IDs and all that. Or a faker, all temporary until you go back home in a month. I guess I'm a skater then. Taoya had no clue what was happening. He had come in here thinking this would be his place of death, but now he was being offered some sort of lifeline. Midoriya watched Taoya closer, narrowing his eye. Me too. He nodded once, pulling his tracksuit top back on as he spoke. If you need me to, I can get you a hookup on skater work. Seeing Taoya's blank expression, He sighed. Paperwork. I think. Shut up. Taoya watched the teen push up the lid of the dumpster and climb out, blowing a cloud of nicotine-laced smoke out like a dragon into the hazy mist. How will I find you? Don't worry about it. Midoriya waved off his question, forked tongue flickering out to taste the air. But Midoriya shut the lid behind him, slowly closing Taoya in. See you soon, Dabai. Taoya, Dabai, he reminded himself, sat in the darkness, the oppressive chill he had been fighting finally lifting as he listened for an all-too-familiar sound and for once didn't hear it. The rain had finally stopped. Dabai doesn't know where he is. Sometime in the middle of the night, he had stumbled out of his place for the night, delirious from his lack of oxygen. He hadn't been able to breathe properly and had blacked out for God knows how long, his fingertips and lips numb as he wheezed. He thinks he's in a cardboard box, but he could be wrong. He's probably wrong. His breaths are shorter now, more useless than ever, and he wonders, am I going to die like this? He couldn't remember if this had ever happened before, but he was sure that would be the sort of thing one would remember. Slowly dying because your body can't handle breathing without fucking it up somehow. Dabai, at least he's warm and dry this time. Hey, old man. Dabai was just going to rest his eyes for a minute. That's all. He just needed to rest. He closed his eyes, breath slowing as he let the haze take him in its statusy embrace. A kick to his thigh barely broke its hold over him, and he looked up into a familiar eye. Waizapnin. He took in a wheezing breath, trying to blink himself awake. Shit, you're worse off than before. Midoriya leaned down, bending at the waist as he prodded Dabai's forehead with a metallic finger. His eyebrows drew together in a mask of concern when he saw the lack of reaction. He was supposed to worry, wasn't he? Midoriya let the silver bleed out of his skin and barely hid the flare of genuine surprise that flashed in his mind when he felt how clammy Dabai was. The wheezing, shaky hands, clammy skin, difficulty focusing. This could be a few things, but one was more likely than the others. Damn, this is bad. Why didn't you mention the asthma? Huh, can you breathe? Dabai stared upwards at Midoriya, eyes unfocused as the teen leaned closer, trying to check his pulse. As he did, his forked tongue flicked against Dabai's face every so often. Gross. It was weirdly wet and far too smooth. Boy, old man. Midoriya snapped his fingers, trying to grab Dabai's attention. Look at me. He leaned back, lifting his right hand. How many fingers am I holding up? Dabai blinked, leaning back as a silverish blur moved in front of his face, and a quiet little voice in the back of his head reminded him that that was Midoriya's right hand. That was weird, right? His left hand lit on fire, but his right was metal? Weird. He swayed where he sat, his oxygen-starved brain working overtime to understand what was happening. His words slurred. Dabai tried to push through the haze. Oh, no, and I can't tell. Midoriya hissed, pushing back his hair before dropping down to his knees and grabbing Dabai by the arm, dragging him out from behind the pile of wood he didn't remember hiding behind. Fuck, I'm taking you to Charon. Dabai can't remember what happens between being swept off his feet and slung over Midoriya's shoulder and being hustled down the street, but the murmur of two overlapping voices begins to bring him around. Fucking hell, Midoriya, what have you gotten yourself into? A scoff and the sound of someone scuffing the floor with their shoes. No clue, Doc. Why did you bring him in? It's not like you to. What? Care? I don't care, you know that. The voice sounded irritated and a little remorseful, but there was something empty about it, like they were putting on an act. I know, don't give me that look. But I couldn't just leave him to die in the trash. This is dangerous, Midoriya. The second voice was filled with worry, but Dabai wasn't sure who for. These burns, they're not self-inflicted. Were they talking about him? Someone tried to kill this kid. Sounded like they were talking about him. PSH, please, it's just attempted murder, so what? Someone tried to kill you, someone tried to kill me, it's not a big deal. That lisp was familiar, Dabai was certain of it. Not a big deal. The second voice dropped to a whisper, trying not to be overheard even though they were alone. Do you know who this is? No, and I said I don't care. That's who he used to be. He's one of us now. There was a pause before the second voice sighed. Skate or die, bitch. Skate or die. Dabai opens his eyes slowly, staring up at the most nondescript ceiling he's ever seen in his life. Trying to sit up, he's pushed back down, a concerned stranger that looks to be carved out of marble standing over him. Glancing around the room, he tries to put the pieces together. He's on a hospital bed. There's a mask strapped to his face, but he can tell by the taste of the air that it's not for oxygen. And four in his hand, some machine taking his pulse. He's honestly not sure what half of it's even for. From beside the door, leaning lazily against the wall, but his posture all but screaming his desire to walk away and not look back, Midoriya asked, Charon, is he awake? Dabai stared, eyes wide in shock when he saw a thin black tail wrapped around Midoriya's leg, ending in a bulbous stinger that tapped against the floor in a staccato rhythm. Like a freaky scorpion, he thought, adding another point of confusion to what he knew about Midoriya. None of the points were connected, just a collection of contradictions and questions. One point was that he had a tail. Another was that he was glaring at him as if he knew what was going through his mind. Luckily, Sharon narrowed their pupilless yellow eyes, watching Dabai carefully as they shifted the mask strap to his face. Concerned but stern, they stepped back, turning the monitor hooked up to the machines towards themselves. "Young man, can you tell me how long you've been walking around with untreated asthma?" "With what? I don't." "Huh." He trailed off, lost in thought. He didn't have asthma, did he? If he did, it would sure explain a lot. Sharon's eyebrows rose a fraction, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know what to look for. But Midoriya knew what to look for. With a hiss, he pushed himself away from the wall, crossing the room to stand on the opposite side of the hospital bed. "Damn it, old man, you made me worry," he grumbled, arms crossed over his chest, his right hand shifting between metal and flesh. "I never worry." "When is the last time you've seen a doctor?" Sharon asked, their voice suddenly eerily calm as their gaze seemed to focus above Dabai's head, like they were watching something only they could see. Dabai rubbed his scars, the silver staples a hard border between them and the rest of his skin. Almost 7 years. The last time he had seen a doctor, he was close to death, his skin peeling and flaking into dust before his eyes. Swallowing around the dryness of his throat, he looked to his other side. Worry began to set in. "Midoriya, what's going on?" Midoriya only shrugged, either ignoring or not even noticing Dabai's anxiety. He gestured across the bed to the doctor. "This is Dr. Charon Manon, don't worry, they're legit." Sharon nodded, a full and sharp grin playing across their face, an odd look for a statue to have. "Skate or die, motherfuckers," they muttered, turning back to the monitor, watching closely the numbers displayed there. Their eyebrows drew together as they whispered to themselves about oxygen saturation and heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature drops. Midoriya snorted when he saw how easily the doctor was distracted. "Skate or die?" "Skate or die?" Dabai asked, his voice muffled from the mask, not sure what was happening. His hands were shaking, and he felt lightheaded, but somehow he felt better than he had in a while. "No, it's skate or die. Gotta enunciate the capital letters," Midoriya corrected. Doing nothing more to explain himself, he waved away any questions Dabai might have. "I'll make sure you get the phrasebook." "The what?" Midoriya glanced to the clock, hissing when he saw the time. "Damn, already," he mumbled, turning to the door. "Sharon, keep an eye on Dabai. I'm going out for an hour." Sharon nodded, a one-word question their only answer. "Black box. Skater work." The doctor nodded once, watching Midoriya's reflection in the monitor. "Stay out of trouble." With a shrug, Midoriya jammed his hands into his tracksuit pockets, pushing the door open with his foot. He pulled his tail tight against his back, nearly closing the door on it with the slow pace he took. "Hey." Sharon turned back to watch Dabai closely, their gaze flicking between the man's face and the space above his head. The doctor leaned in closer, their pupilless eyes unblinking in their focus. "Fascinating." With a few scribbled words on their clipboard, they begin to explain Dabai's treatment. "You're lucky to be awake right now. It took 3 nebulizer treatments to stabilize you, and quite frankly, I'm concerned about your lung integrity." Their words faded to a dull buzz in the background. Dabai kept watching the door after Midoriya had left, trying to piece together what little he knew, needing to know the whole story. "Why is he like that?" he asked, not even realizing he had interrupted the doctor. Shaking their head, Charon checked the level of fluid in the bag connected to Dabai's IV. "It's a long story, and it's not mine to tell." Satisfied with their findings, the doctor stepped back, scribbling on their clipboard. "Maybe one day he'll feel like sharing. But I wouldn't count on it, Dabai. He's been secretive since before he knew what secrets are." "Oh, right," Dabai muttered. Now that his head was clear, he could remember what he had been told in the dumpster. Something clicked as soon as he remembered what Midoriya had said about fake names. And Dabai turned to watch Charon as they wrote on their clipboard. ... You can tell when people are going to die, can't you?" Sharon gave no sign that they were surprised, only set down their clipboard and pen, spinning their chair to face Dabai directly. "What makes you think that?" "If you're a skater." Leaning forward in their seat, Charon watched Dabai closely as they corrected him. "I'm a legit. Haven't been a skater in a long time." Dabai had no idea what those words meant, but he pushed on. "Oh, well, Midoriya said that fake names are only names we have, or something like that." "Fake names are the only real names you got," Charon quoted. They had heard that line from Midoriya more than once. Dabai nodded, getting back on track. "But then your name means something. It's not chosen at random." He thought back to his history classes, the lessons all but carved into his memory. Greek mythology wasn't really his strong suit, but for some odd reason, he remembered everything about the underworld. "Charon, like the Greek ferryman." Charon chuckled, the sound far too dark for the expression on their face. "Smart, aren't we?" They folded their hands in their lap, an example of perfect posture as they carefully calculated their words. "But yes and no. I can see potential. There are no certainties." Those words were all lies. What Charon saw was all but set in the stone that was their own flesh. How much time someone has left, what the sum of their actions is, they could see it all. but Charon thought it best not to mention the timer they saw over everyone's heads, constantly ticking down, 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 never stopping. Sometimes it would change, but never before now had they seen it change for the positive. It always took more time away, never added it. But now, they had seen the impossible happen twice. As soon as Midoriya had barged his way in, a half-dead man over his shoulder, the first thing Charon had noticed was his timer. A number once barely under 3 years was suddenly so much more. And the half-dead man, Dabai, had his time flickering between 2 months and 30 minutes until they had managed to hook him up to the albuterol nebulizer and oxygen. Now both of the timers had all but restarted, giving their owners a fighting chance in this world. They weren't sure what they were supposed to get out of that. They lived in the real world, not a fantasy. Speaking of the real world, Charon picked up their phone from the counter beside the sink, sending a text to the pharmacy on the floor below their office. Asthmatic skater, full package deal CM standing. Charon drew themselves up to their full height, turning to leave. After Midoriya gets back, go down to the pharmacy and tell them Charon sent you and you need the skater's discount. Dabai tried to sit up but immediately quit as the tiny motions sent his world spinning. He settled back down in the pillows, watching as the doctor tried to leave. Wait, you're just gonna leave? He didn't want to be alone. Well, it's been almost half an hour already. Midoriya should be back soon. I'll come back in once he's here. Charon pushed the door open, turning back to Dabai as they said, get some rest, you need it. Dabai just nodded, closing his eyes and letting his exhaustion finally take him. He didn't dream. Unfortunately, his rest was interrupted far too soon. Though he didn't know it, it was exactly 30 minutes between when he fell asleep and when he was jolted awake by a slamming noise that could rival that of the storms. Hey, I'm back. Midoriya all but broke the door down as he crashed through it, dropping a stack of papers on Dabai's lap. The wall was certainly dented where the door had smashed into it, but Midoriya didn't notice. Here, you're my dad now, he said offhandedly, as if those words weren't completely insane. What? He didn't want to be a dad. And he especially didn't want to be Midoriya's dad. That kid was scary and weird. Dabai bolted upright, staring intensely down at the paperwork he had been so graciously gifted. Staring back at him was a passport, a birth certificate, quirk registry paperwork, even a photo ID, though he didn't want to know how Midoriya had gotten his picture. He picked up the ID, looking over the new facts of his life, not noticing the way his hands shook and the blurriness of his vision. His name is Dabai Midoriya. He is 31 years old. His blood type is AB. Most things were the same, just twisted a little. Now he was 4 years older, a believable age for the parent of a large child. Just how old was Midoriya? How old are you? Dabai asked, barely keeping the flood of questions at bay. Like how the hell did a child know where to get fake IDs? Geez, old man, Midoriya snorted with faux derision, a stuttering hiss the closest he came to laughing. Don't even know your son's age. Dabai just stared, not sure if he wanted to ask any more questions. He was tired, a little lightheaded, weirdly energetic somehow, and for some reason, he felt like time was slowing down around him. It's the albuterol, he just doesn't know it yet. Midoriya rolled his eyes. I'm sorry for being mean, he said, not putting any real feeling into the words. Sometimes I forget to be nice, he continued flatly, as if it was a memorized speech. I need to remember to think about people's feelings before I speak. Finished, he sighed, shaking his head. His mask of compassion wasn't a mask at all. It was just a paper plate with the word compassion written on it, and he just held it up whenever he thought it was appropriate. A moment passed, the words hanging stiffly in the air until Midoriya finally got to the point. I'm 13, birthday's in 6 months. How? Dabai trailed off, not even sure where to begin with all of his questions. What? Check your phrasebook and your commandments. Midoriya shrugged, shoving his hands into his pockets as his tail wrapped itself around his torso. Specifically, number 6. Dabai picked up the thin book under the quirk registration paperwork. The skater's Bible was embossed in gold on the cover. Turning the cover, there was a foreword which he skipped over the in memoriam, skipped the dedication, until he found a page reading Skater's Code, the 10 Commandments. Running his fingertip down the numbered list, he read number 6. Never ask a skater's past. Looking back up, he saw Midoriya's point. If your life is in such danger, then you get a new one. You don't go around telling every stranger about it. Oh, sorry. Midoriya waved away his concern, leaning back until his back hit the wall, and he let himself lean where he landed. And you should probably start calling me Izuku. We're family now, needs to be believable. You're very, Dabai frowned, trying to find the right words. Pragmatic. I do what works. He shrugged, untangling his tail where it had his arms pinned to his sides. I don't have ambition or drive, so I just do. Pulling his hand out of his pocket, he began ticking off his list on his fingers. I don't do friends, don't do feeling, don't do sharing, don't do nice, and I don't do caring. Closing his fist, he looked to the door, watching it intently until it opened a moment later. Ah, Midoriya, you've returned. Dr. Charon nodded as he passed the grungy teen And how are you feeling now, Dabai? A little overwhelmed, Dabai shook his head, pushing his hair out of his eyes. He continued, jittery and emotional enough that the words just spilled out. Tired, my hands are shaking, but I also feel like I could run a marathon. Probably shouldn't, Izuku interjected, wearing a small bland grin made devilish by his fangs. You'd stop breathing and die. Indeed, Charon agreed, watching Dabai closely as the doctor removed his face mask. I would recommend you avoid any form of strenuous exercise for at least a month. Charon set about removing the needle for the IV, continuing to talk. If you're living in a place with carpet, see if you can have it removed. It traps dust and other asthma triggers. I'm actually. Dabai hung his head, rubbing the staples on his wrists in an attempt to assuage his discomfort. He thought of the best way to say this, settling on, I'm between homes at the moment. It was not the best way to say that. Well, we'll have to do something about that then. Won't we? The doctor muttered, glancing back to Midoriya with an intent Dabai couldn't decipher. Fine, Izuku mumbled, pulling out an out-of-date phone with a heavily cracked screen. Found an apartment building. Apparently, it's haunted. He mumbled to himself as he scrolled, raising an eyebrow at the next listing. This one's cheaper, not haunted, but the bathroom's down the hall. He continued muttering under his breath, his forked tongue flicking at random. Dabai sat up, realizing for the first time that he wasn't wearing his shoes, and he called himself an adult. If he was going to be renting an apartment, he would need money. I don't even have a job. Sharon bent down, picking up a, far more clean than they had been an hour ago, pair of shoes, handing them to their owner. I can put in a word for you at the gas station I go to. They've been trying to hire night crew for their attached convenience store. Sharon smiled, their head turned at an angle so it wouldn't be seen. I hope you're fine with customer service. You would do that. Dabai sniffled, tears welling up from the shock that someone else would try to help him. Really? Yes, really. Sharon shook their head, stepping back as he prepared to usher Midoriya and his new father to the door. Fuck's sake, Midoriya, where did you find this one? Midoriya shrugged, his mismatched hands shoved into his pockets as he began shuffling sideways towards the exit. All the emotion in the air too much for him to handle. In the garbage, where else? Dabai just sniffed. And in trying to stop himself from crying in front of people for the second time in as many days, he focused on pulled his shoes on. Almost halfway out the door, Izuku straightened up, turning his phone to show anyone who would look. This one's like the second, but in a better neighborhood, multiple job opportunities. And they're not even strip clubs. Midoriya, Charon began until Izuku waved at them dismissively. With a sigh, they shook their head and continued. I've told you time and time again, stop hanging around strip clubs. No, I don't think I will, Izuku replied, stowing his phone away in his pocket. Besides, the only teens they usually let in are on the stage. Get out, Charon finally said, pointing to the door stiffly. And take your father to the pharmacy downstairs. Dabai just trailed after Izuku silently, not trusting himself to break down completely from the display of human kindness. He didn't even register getting into the elevator or stopping by the pharmacy counter to pick up multiple bags of things he didn't even know the name of. He should have been paying more attention to the doctor instead of asking questions about their quirk. He's outside now, it's cold and dark. He's not sure how much time has passed since he was taken to the hospital, but it doesn't matter. He knows that there's still some good in this world. It's hidden away and owned by people the world doesn't want, but it's still there. Here, Midoriya hissed, shoving an orange lump of plastic into Dabai's hands. It's an inhaler. I hope to fuck you know how to use it. Dabai followed behind Midoriya, the kid carrying the bags of medication and Dabai taking only a handwritten map to the apartment complex and the paperwork he had been given. He's not sure where he got the map. I don't know how to thank you for this. Don't, and I'll pay the first month's rent. And last, and security deposit. Izuku stopped, hissing slightly as he tried and failed to keep his right hand from transforming into metal. If you're living with me, just know one thing. Midoriya turned around, watching Dabai with a scrutinizing gaze as if he could see right through him with that one eye of his. Seemingly satisfied with what he found, he turned and continued walking. Don't ask questions. He didn't know how he was going to repay him. He didn't even have a job yet. Still standing in place, shell-shocked, Dabai all but shouted, but that's so much money. Where did you? Izuku shook his head, his tail turning its stinger towards Dabai while behind his back. Don't ask questions and don't worry about it, he said in a tone that he wanted to be menacing, but came across as bored. Dabai hustled to catch up with his new child, tucking his inhaler into his pocket. But that just makes me worry more, he called out, jogging down the city streets at 4 a.m. His name is Dabai Midoriya. He is 31 years old. His blood type is AB. His eyes are wet with held-back tears. And he's happy for the first time in years. It's not even 5 a.m., and Izuku's already committing crimes. Selling drugs is illegal, selling bodily fluids is illegal, and selling poison is illegal. It's not suddenly less illegal if all three are the same substance. He leans against the wall with a soft hiss, wiping the ever-present drool from his lips. Damn fangs don't fit right in his jaw. And the constantly flicking forked tongue doesn't help. The human mouth wasn't meant to house animal parts. If it weren't a pointless exercise, he would wonder if he still qualified as human, tapping his foot impatiently. He looked around, waiting for Black Box to arrive. He wanted to get this over with as fast as possible. He had left Dabai in a diner with a handful of cash less than 5 minutes ago, but for some reason, Izuku couldn't understand. He felt unbalanced. It wasn't like he had left Dabai in danger or anything like that. The News Diner is a safe place. Good food, clean floors, reasonable prices, and a relaxed atmosphere. It's a nice place that's less than 2 blocks away from the new apartment. Sure, maybe he had shoved his new father into a booth and thrown the cash at him before leaving, but that was beside the point. He had made sure to be on the lookout for anyone more suspicious than himself and had found none. But he just can't shake the feeling of instability. He was used to going with the flow, and that's all he was doing now. But it wasn't all that he was doing. He cared, and that was the worst thing he could do. Hey, Scorpion, what do you need me for now? Black Box rose from an unnaturally dark shadow, spinning in place as he did. Bits and pieces of him were still fading into existence as he stepped out of the puddle of shadows. Stumbling a little, he looked down to see his foot was still incomplete, flickering into place as he watched it. He shot Scorpion a cheerful thumbs up, trotting up to him, but keeping a distance of a few feet. He didn't trust the kid's constantly moving tail. Talking as he walked, he continued, "Saw you less than 2 hours ago. What's up with that?" Scorpion was an oddity, something that he wasn't used to running across. It was obvious the kid was a skater, but aside from that, he didn't know anything about him. Just that he was the scariest fucker he had ever met. And Black Box used to fight villains in Colombia for a living. Black Box, Izuku nodded once in greeting, ignoring the broker's second and third questions. They were irrelevant. Dipping into his pocket, he pulled out a small glass vial filled with thick yellow fluid. He swirled the vial, the liquid clinging to the side in thick drops. "I've got a deal, 3 milliliters of venom." The broker stepped forward in awe, silver eyes fixed on the vial. Liquid gold, pure and uncut. A fortune in a bottle. Black Box reached for the vial, only for it to be pulled away, Izuku tucking it back into his pocket with a warning hiss. "Let's talk price," Izuku lisped, his tail twitching as he spoke. 800,000 per milliliter. He knew he could ask for more. 800 was the base price per milliliter for standard venom, but his venom was better in every way than an average Scorpion. But he just needed the cash and needed it now. "Price is no issue. The max amount is guaranteed." Black Box nodded, wanting to get his hands on that venom. Scorpion didn't sell venom to him often, but people always wanted the product. It was like a dirty heroin high with a streak of meth to it that could last for days. 1 micrometer was all it took. Too much could kill you, but it would be so fucking worth it. He could make up the cash in less than a week, selling each milliliter for 12,000 and upwards. Black Box reached into a shadow on the wall, patting around for his lockbox of cash as he spoke. 2,400,000 yen. No doubts about it. When Scorpion nodded, Black Box took that as his cue to start rambling, not even noticing the way the teen's eye glazed over with disinterest. "Nice, this is the pure shit. People will pay good money." Changing subjects from the venom to its producer, Black Box asked curiously, "You've been eating garbage again, haven't you?" Izuku waved away the question. It wasn't like he could get sick from eating garbage. His mutilated body took care of that for him. Hey, it's food, isn't it? Honestly, as soon as food was available in pill form, he was done with eating anything he didn't need to. It would just be the bare essentials for him after that. Not when it's rotting meat, it isn't. Black Box shuddered, his hand pulling out of one shadow and reaching into another as he continued feeling around for his lockbox. "You showed up eating a raw chicken that had maggots in it. That's not food." Izuku just shrugged, waiting for the deal to be done. Small talk isn't his strong suit. Really, he didn't see what the fuss was about. He didn't have taste buds, and he didn't care. Black Box sighed, reaching into a shadow by his feet and pulling out the missing lockbox. "But it makes the venom potent," he admitted as he counted out cash. Stepping up, Izuku pulled the vial out from his pocket, holding it in his right hand in case the deal went south. It had never gone south before, but just in case, he could have his hand metal in crushing the glass before he could blink. With a nod, he extended both hands as Black Box did the same, placing the stack of cash in his right hand. Izuku let the vial slip out of his fingers into Black Box's palm, the ex-hero immediately holding it close to his chest. "Great dealing with you, Scorpion." Black Box would typically extend his hand for a deal-closing handshake. But the last time he had done that, Scorpion had nearly torn his arm off. He wasn't eager to relive the experience. Instead, he just nodded, shooting a thumbs up in Scorpion's direction. "Let me know next time you've got product to move." He felt like he was walking on air. And when he held the vial up to the light, it just got better. There were more than just 3 milliliters in there. There had to be at least 4. Payday had arrived. Jackpot, big money, whatever you wanted to call it. On the black market, he could make over 5 million yen off this. He wouldn't need to work for the next 4 months. Izuku turned on his heel, his tail wrapping around his torso as he tucked the stack of cash into his pocket, pinning his right hand in his pocket as he headed back to the diner. He didn't stay to watch Black Box leave. He just left the alley and turned down the street, mulling over how much this would all change his life. Living in an apartment instead of sleeping in the dumpster behind Banu's or crashing at the skate park. He would need to change his bad habits and change them quickly. No more merely existing, drifting from place to place. He didn't need ambition or anything like that, but he would need a new routine. He hissed, forked tongue flicking out, catching an acidic scent on the air. And based on his smell, some new clothes. All he used to want was to live a life in the shadows, on the furthest fringes of society. But now he was apartment hunting in Hasu, of all places. The chaotic urban sprawl, the famished concreted jungle. He trudged down the streets, hissing at anyone who got too close and keeping his tail twined close around his chest, the bulb of the stinger tucked under his chin. The black fur of the tail bristled in the chilled air, but Izuku barely felt the cold, even as his breath turned to condensation in front of his face. The sun would come up soon, and Banu's was less than a block away. There was no point in hurrying. Besides, he was always cold these days. Ever since. No, he wouldn't think about that. That was then, over and done with for over 2 years now. This is the present. There was no use dwelling on the past. No point in thinking of the future. The present is all we have. Keeping his head down, he forced his tail away from his torso, giving himself enough room to free his arm as he pushed open the door to Banu's diner. For 5 in the morning, there was a surprising amount of people around, sitting in clusters of 3 or more, with a few single people scattered between the groups. And one of those lone people was Dabai, sitting in a booth with a half-empty plate in front of him, reading a pamphlet about albuterol sulfate. Nodding to the hostess, he meandered past the filled tables, picking his way towards his destination, sweeping his tail to the side to avoid crushing it against the back. Izuku flopped down on the bench across from Dabai and dropped the wad of cash onto the tabletop. Over 2 million, he said flatly, watching the shock and awe in Dabai's eyes turn to confusion and confliction. You should dye your hair, Izuku said, not seeing the point in letting the silence last. We're supposed to be related. Black hair makes more sense than red. Izuku's tail brushed against his dark green hair, the black undertones coming through clearer with the movement. It used to be all black. He smacked himself in the side of the head with the bulbous stinger, knocking that right out of his mind. Dabai dropped the pamphlet he had been reading, mind racing to try and process what he was seeing. Less than an hour ago, he had been shoved into the booth, and now Midoriya was back with over 2 million yen. Cash. What the hell did this kid do? Ignorant to the inner turmoil of his companion, Izuku continued, contemplating taking Dabai's unfinished food. I'll pick up furniture and stuff later in the day. Less than an hour. His head hurt. Don't expect anything fancy, Izuku continued, sliding his hand towards Dabai's unattended plate. Just basic stuff, futons, toaster oven. He didn't remember what went into houses or apartments. Table. Do we need rugs? I think adults like rugs. HS Vasa. His head really hurt. Ugh. Izuku shook his head, reaching over and snagging a strip of turkey bacon off of Dabai's plate with his left hand. He missed the taste of bacon. You're going to apply for that open job at the gas station tomorrow. Need to keep up appearances. His brain finally landing on a course of action. Dabai stood, eyes wild as he shouted, how the hell did MMPH? Izuku leaped to his feet, slamming his metal hand over Dabai's mouth, shoving the man back down into his seat. He glanced around the diner. A few people were looking his way, but they had the look of tourists about them. The regulars didn't care. This was Banu's, keeping his hand over Dabai's mouth. He hissed, fangs catching on his lip. Shut up, or you're getting a murder. He stared down at the other, waiting for Dabai to get the hint. Once Dabai nodded, Izuku slowly sat down, pulling his hand back to himself as he did. He glared across the table, something in him twisting when he saw the shock on Dabai's face. Was that emotion? He didn't really remember what that felt like. He didn't like it. He grumbled, crossing his arms over his chest while his tail twitched rapidly. He wasn't used to caring, or worrying, or feeling, for anyone. He wanted it to stop, but he knew it would get worse. Taking his phone from his pocket, he mindlessly scrolled through the trending stories while he tried to mentally assess his internal damage. The emotions, that was the damage. Thankfully, it was only one person. If he worked at it, he was sure the emotions could be contained and subdued, directed at only one person. He's not who he used to be. He can't be emotional all the time. His tail jerked up from where it lay across the booth, smacking him in the face with the bulb of his stinger. Rolling his eyes, Izuku stood, untangling his tail from his legs. When you're done, I'll be outside, he grumbled, picking the cash up and stowing it back in his pocket before collecting the bags from the pharmacy. and turning to head out. Dabai just nodded, pulling his plate back towards himself, eating quickly as he watched Izuku leave. He was so confused, but at least bacon made sense. Wait, where was his bacon? Outside Benu's, Izuku turned down the narrow alley behind the diner, knocking on a metal door. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. Pause. 1 knock and a kick. After a few seconds passed, the door creaked open, and a man with a dark brown feathered crest with black hair tangled within the feathers poked his head out, round yellow eyes landing on his visitor. His posture straightened, and his entire attitude shifted to beyond perky into nightmarish. Midoriya, how are you? Stepping out of the door entirely, the man stood in the alley, his hawk's talons scraping across the clean concrete. He bounced in place excitedly, watching Izuku like a hawk, or an eagle, or perhaps like a crested hawk eagle. Hoyle, Izuku nodded in greeting, his gaze landing on the massive wings that arched high behind the man's shoulders. He wanted to look away, but couldn't help but watch how they telegraphed Hoyle's every thought. I wanted to tell you I won't be needing your dumpster tonight. Oh, Hoyle leaned closer, watching Izuku lean away. Are you staying at the skate park again? Izuku shook his head, gesturing with his tail out the alley. No, I'm renting an apartment a block away. Hoyle squawked, his crest straightening up, adding another 1.5 feet to his height. You, an apartment? He looked around, lifting his talons from the ground. Did hell freeze over? Izuku sighed internally, wondering why he even bothered when it came to Hoyle. I'll tell my brother. He'll be overjoyed. Hoyle turned back to the door, shoving his head back in the building. His wings fluffed up, giving a hint as to what was about to happen. BNU. About 5 seconds later, the door creaked open further, a shadow blocking all light that came from it. The figure that exited it taller than it by a measure, having to duck down to fit through the frame. Holding a greasy spatula in one hand and with an apron over his clothes, Benu glared in Hoyle's direction with a withering gaze. As avian and slim Hoyle was, Benu was the opposite. The only indication he was Hoyle's twin was the same eyes and the feathers that mixed in his hairline, plunging down his chest and the back of his neck with rich browns and vivid golds. Benu was a hulking figure, even under the feathers. The forms of his muscles were distinct. Turning towards Izuku, Benu blinked slowly, saying nothing. He's moving into an apartment, Hoyle said excitedly. Hopping in place, a perfect picture of boundless energy. In contrast, Benu just nodded once, turning to leave and get back to work. He's overjoyed. Hoyle clapped excitedly before darting forward and hugging Midoriya tightly, his wings wrapping the two in a dark feathery cocoon. HRNK. Izuku froze, his entire body tense, forked tongue darting rapidly as he waited for Hoyle to release him. Why was everyone around him always so emotional? This was more physical contact than he's had in 2 years. He doesn't like it. Less than 4 seconds later, but what might as well have been an eternity, Hoyle stepped back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm so happy, so happy for you, he murmured before wiping at his eyes again, stepping backwards through the door. Come back and see us at the skate park soon, K. Izuku said nothing, turning on his heel, his tail flicking back behind him, knocking the door shut as he strode out of the alley. The twins were tolerable. In small doses, of course. Coming back around the building, Izuku nearly ran into Dabai as the man opened the door and stepped through it. Stopping himself, he leaned backward, away from any emotion that might get on him. He's had enough emotion in the last few hours to last him a lifetime. The building is this way, right? Dabai pointed towards his left. Eyebrows furrowed as he tried to remember. He pointed to the right with his other hand, a perplexed look on his face. Or this way. Oh, hold on. He patted down his pockets, looking for the map he had been given. Found it. Unfolding the paper, he turned it over in his hands, looking around him for the landmarks and street names while Izuku just shrugged, turned around, and started walking. Wait up. Izuku kept walking, but he raised his tail's stinger up to his face, the hard shell of the bulb making the perfect mirror to use to watch Dabai jog to catch up with him. He knew the address. It wasn't difficult to find the direction from there. Besides, the sun is creeping up over the horizon, and he wants nothing to do with that. What he really wants most of all is to get this day over and done with, even if it kills him in the process. Dabai sat up from his nap, looking around himself in confusion. Where did you get all this furniture? He looked down, face scrunching up. How did I get on a futon? He asked quietly, wondering if he was losing his mind. Lounging across his new futon, Izuku raised a cigarette to his lips. Instead of answering the question, he asked one of his own. What was the one thing I told you needed to know about living with me? Don't ask questions, Izuku nodded, leaning back on his pillow, closing his eye. Exactly, Dabai frowned, brushing his hair out of his eyes. Is that just me that can't ask questions, or can you not ask me questions either? Izuku just rolled over onto his side, glaring at Dabai with his one eye. He let the silence stretch on, becoming thin and sharp with time. Maybe he had found some furniture inside of someone's house, someone that in the past had perhaps insulted him in an unforgivable way. And now he had their stuff, poetic justice or something like that. And he had swiped his entire stock of cigarettes for good measure. Now they have 2 futons. One already smells like a dumpster, and the other will smell like a funeral pyre by the time the sun rises. A TV sits on the floor in the corner. There's a dent in the side and dust in the back, but it should get the news and public access channels just fine. Stacked on top of the boxy TV is a massive pile of cigarette cartons, Izuku's favorite part of the haul. Spread across the counter on one wall next to the built-in sink was a hot plate and electric skillet. One small pot, one pan. Beside the counter was a bright pink mini fridge. And on top of that was a coffee maker and a toaster oven. The only other thing in the room was a coffee table, already covered in junk and Dabai's medications. Izuku didn't care about the quality of the furniture. He had retribution and Jiren had no stuff. If his emotions weren't so dulled, he would laugh openly and wildly at the thought of the info broker going to his sad single-man apartment at the end of the day and seeing that he had been robbed. Everything fits neatly in the apartment, the single room much larger than advertised. Or maybe it hadn't been the one advertised. There are more windows, and the built-in sink hadn't been in the pictures. But maybe paying a year's worth of rent upfront with security deposit was more than enough to give them the prime apartment. But Izuku didn't really care about that. What he cared about was the fact that his hair was wet. He had just gotten out of the shower. And before lighting up, he still smelled like garbage and cigarettes. Maybe garbage was just his natural scent. And if it was, he didn't really know what to do about that. He didn't know if he could do anything about that. He didn't care about a lot of things, didn't worry or feel, but he didn't really like the idea of living the rest of his life smelling like this. But it could still be worse. He could smell like a burning corpse fire like Dabai currently does. Rolling off the futon, Izuku staggered to his feet, heading to the door. "I'm going out," he grumbled, leaving before Dabai could say a word. Izuku thinks the stress of everything happening at once is too much for his new dad. But he's not taking himself as an authority on anything emotional. Rubbing at the patch over his left eye, Izuku wondered about what his life would be like if he took it off. Harder. For one, he would need to focus on avoiding blasting a hole in whatever he saw. Maybe it would be a good practical exercise. His focus was poor and needed improvement. He might as well train part of his piecemeal quirk while he was at it. Hands in his pockets and cigarette hanging from his lips. He left the apartment, the sun far above the horizon now, casting his shadow ahead of him as he walked towards the 7:11 down the street. Pulling his phone out of his pocket, he glanced at the time, 7:47 a.m. As he breathed out, his breath fogged in the air, mingling with the smoke of the cigarette. There were more people on the street now, but they avoided walking near him, wanting nothing to do with the teenager with wet hair and a one-eyed glare. As he walked, he kept a mental tally of all the shady alleyways he saw before giving up and concluding that Hasu had to be at least 70% alleyways and narrow passages between dirty buildings. He reached the 7:11 quicker than he expected. He had only had time to light up another cigarette halfway through the walk, and it was still burning almost to the filter once he arrived. He rechecked the time, raising an eyebrow. 8:24 a.m. Either he had gone through a time warp or his focus was worse than he had thought. The 7:11 parking lot was empty. The bike rack was full, and the attached gas station only had a few cars there. Stopping outside the door, he finished his cigarette, stubbing the butt out in the palm of his left hand before flicking it in the general direction of the trash. Glancing at the help wanted sign, he pushed the door open, ignoring the greeting from the one person behind the counter. He didn't know her. There was no reason to say anything in return. A few other people were in the store, and Izuku grabbed a basket, heading down the first aisle, only to turn back around when the first thing he saw was pseudoscientific herbal supplements that promised nothing and useless vitamins covered in vague descriptions of their effect. That wasn't even close to what he was here for. He might eat garbage, but even he didn't eat that kind of trash. In the past, if he needed health supplements, he'd just eat some fucking grass or bark and hope for the best. Going down the next aisle led him to what he was looking for, a variety of boxes of cheap hair dye and rubber gloves. Mumbling to himself, he picked up 2 different boxes of black dye, turning them over to compare the differences. There were none. Taking the cheaper option, then taking one of the other as well, he turned to grab a box of gloves, narrowly avoiding running into a wet floor sign. Hissing, he grabbed a box of gloves, dropping them in the basket before he turned down the next aisle, eyeing the boxes of protein bars and instant ramen. Might as well pick up some food that hasn't been in the garbage while he's here. A few minutes later, with a half-full basket and his wallet in hand, Izuku walked up to the counter, the girl from earlier replaced with an exhausted-looking man with the magic word of manager on his name tag. Izuku began setting his items on the counter, watching the manager with a critical eye as they seemed to be actively tunneling deeper into a pit of despair the more boxes he stacked on the counter. "So, I see you're hiring," Izuku began, immediately interrupted by the manager. "Do you want the job?" He rushed out, tired eyes wide. "My day crew is ready to walk if they have to keep working nights." Izuku leaned back, hands raised defensively. "No, not me." The manager seemed to deflate on the verge of tears, but Izuku's next words brought him back. "But my dad's looking for a job. He's coming in tomorrow, so..." "Oh my god. Yes, yes." The manager finished wringing Izuku out in a frenzy, rushing back to the office and bringing out a stack of paper. Here, he put them in Izuku's bag, pushing everything across the counter. "Application, emergency contact form. New hire packet. Take it, take it, take it." Yeesh. Izuku took the bag slowly, backing away from the counter and out the door, not taking his gaze off the manager. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but he's pretty damn sure he just got Dabai a job. As he turned to head back to the apartment, his gaze landed on the bike rack beside the door, and an extraordinarily dim light bulb light up in his head. Squinting slightly in the early morning sun, Izuku trudged back to the apartment, for the first time in a long time, planning for the future. At 9:14, Izuku returned to the apartment, unlocking the door and dropping the bag next to the door as he struggled to take off his shoes without using his hands. Giving up, he crouched down, tail twitching in what he assumed was animalistic irritation. Even with how dull his emotions were, he knew he regretted that. He wanted to know more, but the apathy made it seem so irrelevant. Once his shoes were off, he picked the bag back up, taking it to the counter and emptying it, taking the boxes of hair dye in hand and dropping them on Dabai's lap where the man was sitting on his own futon, reading the skater's Bible intently. Oof. Dropping his book, Dabai picked it up again quickly, making sure he hadn't lost his page. Setting it beside him on the futon, he looked at the collection of boxes on his lap, picking up the first one. "What's this?" he asked to himself, knowing Izuku would just ignore him. "I'll help," Izuku said, surprising himself and Dabai. He sighed internally. He had forgotten that caring makes you want to help people. "Well, it is a good idea," Dabai mumbled, reaching up and twisting a lock of vibrant red hair around his finger. It was too noticeable and had grown out in the last few months on the streets. His hair had been a low priority. The only thing on his mind during that time was survival and getting away from that damned place. Dabai shuddered, brushing off the memories of solitude, locked away from everyone else, the word failure continually ringing in the background, the sounds of everyone he knew and loved far away, yet so close it was killing him. "Thanks," he said weakly, his hands trembling. This was his family now. It was different and strange, but good in its own way. He just had to get used to it. Also, Izuku handed Dabai the stack of papers. "There's a job for you at the 7-11 down the street. I don't think you even need Charon to put in a good word for you. The manager is desperate for night crew workers. It's about a 30-minute walk." Izuku continued, idly wondering what the expression on Dabai's face meant. "You should think about buying a bike. I'm not sure if. It's been a long time since I've ridden a bike." He thinks he had maybe been 10, perhaps a little older, the last time he had ridden a bike. And he hadn't really been much good at it, either. He remembered falling off a lot and everyone laughing at him. "A scooter." Izuku snapped his fingers, a gleam in his eye for the first time in a long while, as he gestured to the book at Dabai's side. "A skateboard." Dabai laughed, the sound echoing off the bare walls. He raised his hand, the sign of the horns the first thing that came to mind. In his mind, skateboarders were still gritty counterculture punks, something he had once desperately wanted to be. Now he had that chance. With a shaky grin, he looked up at his saving grace. His family of something weird. Skate or die. Bitch. The cursing is optional, but yeah, skate or die. Izuku snorted, tossing up a peace sign in return. He didn't have the energy to be hardcore. You got a lot to learn about being a skater. Izuku held out his hand to Dabai, waiting for the other to take it, pulling him to his feet. Izuku bent down and picked up a box of hair dye and the box of gloves, gesturing to the door as he spoke. "Lucky for you, I'm willing to tell you everything you need to know about being a sidewalk surfer. It's a nice day out," Izuku muses, watching birds fly overhead. Sparrows, his mind supplies as he watches them dart and swoop about. Small and fragile things. He kicked at the sidewalk, leaning back against the brick wall of the apartment building, a cigarette hanging loosely from his lips. His tail wrapped around his legs, keeping him in place. Watching people on the sidewalk skirt around him, he blinked twice with his uncovered eye. The passive quirk within it always made it hard to look at living things. Seeing heat signatures all the time could be useful, but in the city it was a nightmare. But he couldn't use his left eye to see without blowing a hole in whatever he was looking at. Yet, maybe with time, he could control it entirely. But for now, even just a few minutes was too much. It was just safer and easier to keep it covered. Leaning his head back against the wall, he opened his jaws wide and exhaled a massive smoke cloud. His forked tongue darted through the cloud, catching the scent of nicotine with the sensors embedded into the roof of his mouth. It was cold enough that even he was beginning to feel it, seeping into his scars and where his skin was thin. Unknown to him, his lips twisted into a grin, and a shiver ran through his spine. He could feel the cold, and that tiny bit of feeling made an ember of irritation flare through his mind. And right now, that was more than enough for his emotion-starved brain. His right arm erupted in goosebumps, and with a shimmer of metal, they settled, the transformation creating just enough warmth to chase the chill away. Cool quirk. Izuku opened his eye, seeing a brown-haired girl watching him with a curious expression. She was dressed for the cold, a thick blue scarf wrapped around her several times, and a pair of yellow fingerless gloves on her hands. Izuku frowned, shifting his cigarette to the left side of his mouth, not wanting to exhale smoke into a random stranger's face. Oh, hello. Hi, I'm Uraraka. The girl waved a greeting, an awkward smile on her face, like she didn't know what she was doing. And her accent was different, not from around here. At least, not always from here. Maybe she moved recently. Haven't seen you before, you new here. Izuku nodded once, jerking his thumb behind him, tapping on the brick. Just moved in with my dad. Oh, it'll be good to have someone my own age around. I'm not good at making friends. I don't do friends, Izuku grumbled, breathing smoke from the left side of his mouth. There was a missing intensity that usually came with those words, but he wasn't aware of the change. Sure, Uraraka said, eyeing the boy suspiciously. So, what's your name? None of your business. Nice to meet you, none of your business. Uraraka chuckled, not missing the eye roll that wasn't sent her way but was obviously meant for her. She watched the boy's tail, scorpion sting slapping against his pant leg in a way she would call nervous. She pointed towards her apartment. I live across the street, so if you ever need anything. I won't, Izuku said, certainty rounding out his bland tone. Well, I've got to get back. She jogged back across the street, waving goodbye with a grin on her face. See you later, none of your business. Ugh. Izuku just rolled his eye, stubbing his cigarette out in his palm, dropping the paper-wrapped filter to the ground before he turned and headed back inside. He had stuff to sew, couldn't spend his time talking. Climbing the stairs, part of him wondered if he should make friends, but he dismissed that thought with a lash of his tail. The word friend was too vague. Say, if anyone who he didn't want to kill and could bear to be around qualified as a friend. That made it much less important to clarify the difference between them all. It was easier to qualify none of them as a friend, instead of having to pick and choose who the word applied to and who it didn't. It was irrelevant, he decided, as he pushed open the door to his apartment. Oi, old man, we gotta. Izuku sighed, this sight before him already too familiar. He looked down at Dabai, the man obviously stressed and worried, though he was trying his best to hide it. What's wrong with you? He usually would ask, what's wrong with you now? Always abrasive and vicious on to push everyone away. But his mind was filled with enough fog from his irritation that he didn't. Nothing, I'm fine. Is that your quirk paperwork? Izuku bent down, taking the papers from Dabai's hand. He raised an eyebrow, reading over the details of Dabai's quirk. Quirk type, emitter. Quirk name, blue spark. Abilities, limited fire production. He had the feeling that wasn't the whole story, but he didn't care enough to ask more. From behind the paper came a quiet question. Can I tell you something? I'd rather you didn't. I'm sure I don't want to know, Izuku replied, folding the papers and tucking them under his arm. He turned to leave, but for some reason, he stopped when he heard Dabai continue talking. Dabai kept his head down, his hands clenched into fists on his thighs. Save it, don't tell me anything. Izuku turned back, hissing down at Dabai. His lip curled in something his mind once understood as disgust, as he spat out his next words. I don't share. Dabai clenched his fists tighter, chewing on his lip as he stared up at the teen. Glancing to the skater's Bible, he had an idea. Staring Izuku down, he dared him to argue against what he said next. Commandment 8. A secret is to be kept, Izuku quoted back to him, eyebrows drawing together. You have a secret. A secret was different than sharing. Izuku didn't mind secrets. Secrets could be sacred, kept close to the heart, and never shared once told. Stepping back a bit, Izuku folded his legs neatly underneath himself and sat, watching Dabai intently. He could keep a secret. Dabai let his shoulders slump, but he didn't hang his head. He knew Izuku couldn't pity him. He wouldn't feel angry that it had happened, wouldn't try to comfort him. He couldn't do any of that. He would just listen. He would just be there. And that's all Dabai needed to let the words spill out. You know that my burns aren't self-inflicted, he said. Not a question, just a statement of fact. He traced the splotch of purple on his neck that was darker than the rest. 4 distinct marks of fingers wrapping around his throat, an echo of his destruction. And he rolled up his sleeves, letting Izuku see clearly for the first time the same handprint that circled his wrist. My. Dabai cleared his throat, his knuckles white from how tight his hands were clenched into fists on his thighs. My father tried to kill me when I was 20. He admitted, feeling a pressure fly off his chest. I was supposed to be his prodigal son or whatever, but my quirk wasn't good enough for him. I wasn't meant to have his flames. I take after my mother too much. He scoffed, rubbing his wrist uncomfortably. Izuku stayed silent, waiting for Dabai to continue. A secret is to be kept. Dabai finally got up the nerve to continue, his hands shaking now. I wasn't good enough for him. After all, Endeavor can't walk around with a defective child, could he? He blinked the blurriness away from the edge of his vision. He refused to cry over this, so he tried to train my little brother the same way he did me. And I snapped. I couldn't let that happen. He was only 8, and since Mom was gone, I was the only one left to stand up to him. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand, staples dragging across staples. I tried to fight him, but he got the upper hand. And before I knew it, I couldn't breathe, and my quirk did nothing against him, but I wasn't just going to let him kill me. I pushed, and the flames came pouring out. I managed to get him to back off. I actually burned him, but the damage to me, it was already done. Dabai's voice, ordinarily hoarse, was rougher than usual, and he rubbed his hand over his throat. The damage was permanent. I was in the hospital for years, but not the entire time until, now. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Over 7 years in the hospital, and most likely ICU. Glorified solitary confinement at that point. No wonder Dabai was an emotional mess all the time. Years of consistent stress and severe bodily trauma has a way of sticking with people. Investigators were starting to snoop around. A friend had reported me missing or something, and Endeavor couldn't have that. Dabai sneered, shaking his head. He didn't even know he had a friends to begin with. So he had me moved into the rear wing of the complex. 3 rooms. No windows, doors locked from the outside, and because of the severity of the burns, I couldn't even scream. Dabai went quiet, eyes narrowed as he tried to make himself continue. But he couldn't. He just let himself breathe for a moment, thankful for the silent presence sitting across from him. A flare of muddled emotion burst in Izuku's mind. Horror, shock, disgust, and more of that now familiar worry. But he kept silent, waiting for Dabai to continue of his own volition. Clearing his throat, Dabai whispered hoarsely, I was locked in there for 4 years until I managed to get myself out after a doctor's visit. The so-called doctor didn't know he was supposed to lock the door behind him, so I ran. It was just luck. Dabai chuckled, the sound dark and morbid. He should have, died in those rooms. His life should have ended there, not restarted. I've only been out for 4 months, but it's been the best 4 months of my life. It wasn't hyperbole, just a fact. Even dying on the street would have been better than living there. Fuck. Izuku sat stone still, his dulled emotions brightening with hatred for a moment before flaring out, his passivity securely back in place. He nodded, his mind throwing up an idea when he saw the raw vulnerability on Dabai's face. A secret for a secret. Deep in Izuku's suppressed mind, a thought bubbled up, crystal clear. It seemed Endeavor needed to be added to the list. He was a lucky hero. Only 4 other people were on the list, and the only way off the list was death. The doctor who had made him. The one who decided to keep the doctor in his employment even after he saw what he had done. And them. He wouldn't speak or think of them. They didn't want him. They didn't deserve him. They had replaced him. Finally speaking again. Izuku was hesitant, not sure if he should do one of the things he had all but promised himself he would never do again. I'll keep your secret, but I need you to keep one of mine. Understand? Dabai just nodded, not trusting himself with actual words at the moment. It took all his energy and strength not to cry in front of a teenager for the 3rd time in as many days. He really was too much like his mother at times. Izuku reached up, pulling his eye patch off for the first time all week, revealing a medical patch taped over his eye. The skin surrounding the eye was numb, and Izuku didn't so much as twitch as he pulled the tape off and let it adhere to itself. With Izuku keeping the eye closed, Dabai leaned a tiny bit closer and could see the lashes of this eye were thicker and a soft gray, not the dark black of the other. It reminded him. Red and white, dark gray and bright blue, blazing fire and ice. The pieces of the puzzle that was Izuku were starting to turn over, slowly but surely. The image that was there was distorted, but it was an image nonetheless. Izuku transformed his right hand into metal and held it over his left eye as he opened it. And when his hand wasn't immediately vaporized, he lowered his hand, revealing an electric green eye. It wasn't so much an eye as it was the lack of an eye. A starving void in his head that wanted nothing more than to explode out and destroy as soon as given a chance. It's hard to control. His teeth clenched, Izuku hissed, trying to keep his focus. These eyes, these arms, these lungs, this heart, the tail, this spine, nearly all of this. He gestured to himself, from the tips of his toes to his hair. It isn't mine. It was taken by the one who altered me, made me into his vision. I'm not who I was before they took me, and over a dozen people died to create me. Izuku's tone became bland as if he were reciting from a script that he didn't write himself. The parts had to be fresh. His next words were, Dabai was hesitant to classify them as angry. It was more of a parody of the emotion, but he suspected that was as close to actual feeling that Izuku could come. Izuku closed his eyes. His breathing was harsh for a few moments until he seemed to calm as if some tipping point had been reached. And I wasn't the only one, Dr. Tsubasa made. There were 12 others. I was just the test subject for the others' procedures. Subject 0. He didn't want to waste good parts if it didn't work. Izuku hesitated. For a moment, his mind was back in the warehouse. Bloodstained medical equipment and the scent of corpses. A blackened stain. 8 pints worth of blood splatter on the floor where Ninno. He couldn't go back to that memory. Not if he wanted to keep himself in reality. With an air of finality, he finished what he had to say. But I'm the only one that worked in the end. I'm telling you this secret because I believe you will keep it. And because as much as I don't do emotions. Izuku felt a flare of something he didn't care to identify. He just knew it was an emotion. And one of the mushier ones that he had spurned. I want you to trust me. And to stop being so goddamned emotional all the time. He can't handle it. Dabai nodded slowly, unable to look away from the electric nothing in Izuku's head. I'll keep your secret, he said, signaling that the conversation was over. But he still had one question that had been niggling at his mind as soon as he realized Izuku hadn't been created, but had been altered. If I can ask, what was your original quirk? I don't use that quirk anymore. Izuku felt a sudden flash of unidentifiable emotion that fizzled out almost before he could register it. Despair. His quirk. It's broken. It doesn't work right anymore. Izuku let his fingertips of his left hand flare up. And after a moment, the dusty purple flames pulled up off of his skin, turning a bright yellow as soon as they left his fingers. A small ball of flame was hovering in his palm before it began to fluctuate wildly, rapidly changing from yellow to white, back to a deep cherry red and back to white again before losing its shape and integrity before it snapped out of existence. Heat dispersing through the room. I can't use fireball anymore, and what little bit I can is only on my left side now. Izuku's tail lashed side to side, the closest to an emotional display that he was capable. I'm stuck with eclectic, instead. Dabai pulled his knees to his chest, voice quiet as he admitted, I'm scared of my quirk. It's so much like his. Every time I try to use it, I panic. Izuku sucked on his fangs, brow furrowed without him knowing it. Hey, can I show you something? He asked, tone his usual flavor of bland. But there was a glint in his eye, and it wasn't in the one that was glowing. Dabai nodded, watching as Izuku resecured his eye patch before lighting his hand back up. Show me, Izuku gestured with the purple flames, putting them out as he grabbed at Dabai's arm. Just a little, his hand trembling. Dabai lit up his fingertips, bright blue flames crackling to life. He could barely look at it, focusing more on the smoke than the fire. With every snap, he flinched back a little more. Before Dabai could extinguish the fire, Izuku held out his left hand, eyebrows drawn together in fierce concentration. The blue fire shifted, pulled away from Dabai's hand in a thick strand, transmuting to yellow as it collected in Izuku's palm. See, the ball of fire fizzled out, shrinking to a tiny point of white light as it was extinguished. I can handle it if you ever need me to. All that was left of the flame was the heat in the room, and we'll never have to pay for heating. Dabai watched, confusion muddling his mind. This kid was willing to help control his flames. He had already given him so much, and he knew it wasn't out of the kindness of his heart. Glancing up, he saw a tiny, genuine smile on his kid's face. Unconsciously, Dabai echoed the expression, a lightness in his chest for the first time in nearly a decade. Realizing his mistake, Izuku blinked once and his face dropped back into its usual blank mask, and he stood abruptly, picking the quirk paperwork back up and tucking it under his arm. He shook himself mentally, the last trace of caring and weakness swept away neatly under the facade usual expression he wore. Come on, old man, we gotta turn this in. Then you gotta go to work, right? Dabai muttered, pushing himself to his feet and schooling his expression into something that wouldn't make people question his sanity. Time to go be a productive member of society. Waiting for Dabai to leave, Izuku muttered to the empty room, we live in a society. Izuku chuckled darkly, slowly shutting the door behind him. Halfway down the stairs, Dabai called back up, I heard that. Izuku rolled his eyes, checking on his eye patch with a light touch before he followed his father down the stairs and into normalcy. To himself, he whispered, that was the point, old man. Hey, old man. Izuku nudged Dabai with his shoulder, pointing with his tail towards a small storefront with a tie-dye mural and bright painted decks for longboards and skateboards in the window. You're gonna need transport. What? What does that mean? Those were the first words Dabai had said since he had turned his quirk registration paperwork in. The entire time in the office, he had just stood there, his only words hello, yes, no, thank you, and goodbye. He had sounded so tired, and Izuku was hesitant to classify emotions, but he would say he sounded empty. Izuku didn't like that Dabai had sounded like that. Izuku didn't like that he cared about that. What the fuck does it sound like it means? Izuku rolled his eyes, his fists in his pockets as he stepped through the open door. Inside the shop, it smelled like incense and skunky musk. After spending so much time around Black Box, it was a familiar scent. With a shake of his head, he started looking at the available options. Skateboards, longboards, dirtboards, balance boards. He's already bored, but not so bored to miss the way his tail twists around Dabai's wrist, dragging the man behind him through the shop. How tall are you? Izuku asked mindlessly, not waiting for an answer as he tugged Dabai towards the longboards. This seems about right. He grabbed a plain deck, a nice kicktail cruiser, perfect for short to medium rides. A commuter board. He handed Dabai the deck, then set about looking for trucks, riser pads, and wheels. Every so often, he would glance back at Dabai before making a final decision, putting together the perfect board. With a small grin made evil by his fangs, he grabbed a roll of grip tape, hiding it behind his back as he walked up to the counter. Watching closely as he was setting it down, Dabai could see that it was hot pink with electric purple leopard print. His longboard was going to end up looking like something that the tackiest of people would never think of stealing. A neon nightmare. For some reason, he couldn't come up with an argument against it. Maybe he didn't want to. Hot pink with electric purple leopard print it would be. As the cashier begins to ring everything up, Izuku forcibly unwraps his tail from Dabai's wrist, making his way towards a rack of boards labeled high density tolerant. Not even considering any other options, he grabbed the first board he saw, a shorter board than the rest, but it was thicker and wider as well. Flipping it over in his hands, he nodded once, heading back up to the counter with his acquisition. All right, the cashier drawled, obviously bored out of their mind. After a few seconds, they finished scanning everything, and they bagged up every small component before asking, need anything else? Some slide gloves. Tail devil? Yes, and yes, Izuku answered, using his tail to gesture at the items under the glass in the counter. He stared at Dabai's hand for a moment, estimating the size of glove he would need. Large gloves, most ridiculous color possible, he lisped, forked tongue flicking out. All right. The cashier grinned, their smile taking up most of their face. Neon green with little pastel pink pitchforks it is. What? Dabai finally broke from his stupor, hiding his face in his hands. Oh my god, he muttered, the sound muffled. He was going to look like an absolute fool. Yeah, it was a custom order, but they fell through last month, so you'll be getting them on discount. The cashier reached into the glass counter, pulling out a pair of gloves with thick green palms and a large piece of flint with plastic backing. Your son is trying to make you look like an idiot, isn't he? Yes. Dabai looked over to Midoriya, and he swore he could see devil horns in the kid's shadow. Midoriya just blinked back at him, a blank expression on his face. Did he even know how he was making Dabai feel? Was he truly as ignorant to emotions as he had said? Dabai didn't want to believe it, but he knew that sort of emptiness, it couldn't be faked. Turning back to the cashier, Dabai leaned in and asked, how do you report a kid for bullying? Your own kid. The cashier sucked on their teeth. Sucks to be you, man. That's impossible. Ringing everything up, they pressed a key on their cash register, the drawer popping open with a clack. 33,803 yen, please. Izuku dug in his pockets, pulling out his wallet after a few moments of fumbling. He began counting out cash, piling it on the counter before putting his wallet away and pushing the pile towards the cashier. 34. You know what? The cashier just shoved the bills into the till, not bothering to sort them before they closed the drawer, bits of the bills sticking out where they hadn't been put in completely. I ain't counting all of that. I'll take you at your word. Izuku nodded, taking the bag and the deck in one hand, setting the skateboard on the floor. He stepped onto it, adjusting his stance before pushing off, rolling towards the open door. His tail thrashed wildly, like an excited animal, and he rolled out the door, stopping outside the window and staring in, swaying in place slightly as the board rolled back and forth on the sidewalk. Sorry, Dabai muttered, his hands frantically making placating gestures, and he could feel the heat of embarrassment burning his cheeks from being associated with Midoriya and his antics. So sorry. A tap on the window pulled him out of his embarrassment, Midoriya watching him through the glass as he finally followed him out the door. As Dabai hung his head and hid his face in his hands, he heard the cashier call out behind him, come back anytime. Dabai doesn't think he can go back ever again. He just wants to curl up and let the world swallow him whole. Come on, old man. Dabai jerked his head up. He hadn't heard Izuku maneuver his board behind him. Don't look so down. Izuku paused, and Dabai could hear genuine concern in his voice. You're good, right? You gotta be good. Sidewalk surfer. He'd called him that before, but Dabai hadn't seen those words mentioned in the skater's Bible. Was it more skater lingo that he had to learn? Sidewalk surfer, he asked, heading down the sidewalk towards his possible new job. Yeah, original term for skaters, but not for skaters. Well, that made perfect sense, right? Izuku snorted, crouching down slightly on his board, picking up speed as he passed Dabai. So, old man, why am I old man now? Dabai watched as Izuku cut back around, skating backward now. You know my name. You're my dad. Calling you by your name is weird. Izuku rolled his eyes, trying to lead Dabai through the steps of crafting the perfect skate, but he just didn't seem to be picking up as fast as Izuku had hoped he would. Get it? Okay, point. Suddenly it clicked, and Dabai chuckled. The kid was trying to get him to work on his skate, build himself into more than just some facts on an ID card. Be a real person, because all he had so far was single dad trying his best. And that might be good enough for now, but in the long run, no, he needed to build on that. Interests, hobbies, favorite books and movies, political views. Just who was he now? But come on, old man, I'm not old. Izuku shook his head, hands clasped behind his back as he carved his way down the sidewalk. You're older than 20, you're old. Oh, he walked a little faster, trying to catch back up to his son. The few people on the sidewalk jumped to the side to avoid being run over by Midoriya, and they waved to Dabai, understanding laughter in their eyes. All they saw was a father chasing after their disrespectful skater son. Dabai picked up the pace a little more, all but jogging now. Kids these days, so disrespectful, he huffed, patting at his pocket to make sure he had his inhaler on him. Yeah, Izuku hissed, tail lashing behind him. Stick it to the old people. He cracked a lopsided grin, baring his fangs as he rode, just letting himself go. Maybe he even enjoyed it. In no time, the two were close to the 7-11, the sidewalk rougher, twisted tree limbs hanging over it. Izuku narrowed his eyes, leaning back just in time to avoid a low-hanging branch that almost smacked Dabai in the face once he got to it. The sun was beginning its slow descent towards the horizon, marking nearly the third hour they had been out on the town. By the time they reached the 7-11, the shadows were beginning to swallow up the city streets, and the street lamps flickered on, casting yellowed light across the ground. Letting himself coast to a stop, Izuku stepped off and kicked his board up into his arms, jogging back to slap Dabai on the back. You ready, old man? Ooh, Dabai's hands shook with nerves, and he nodded. Yes, 8. Izuku walked to the trash can beside the door, setting his board down and untying his tail from around the bags. I'll build your board while you're inside. Have fun in the rat race. Izuku squatted down, digging in the first bag to begin putting things together. Okay. Dabai gave his kid a shaky grin, then turned to the 7-11, paperwork in hand, ready to turn the page on this new chapter of his life. Oh no, what if they wanted references? They hadn't asked for them on the application, but what if they did now? Less than 15 minutes later, Dabai comes out in a daze, a folded uniform in his hand. He looked down at Izuku. The kid crouched next to a garbage can, his right hand transformed into metal to work as a crude multi-tool. Dabai leaned against the garbage can, trying to sort out his thoughts. So, I've got put on the schedule already. Izuku looked up from his work, the tip of his finger pressed against the final bolt securing the trucks to the board. He raised an eyebrow, the only evidence he was paying attention at all. Oh, yeah, it's just 3 hours to get used to the flow of things, but that's a lot faster than I expected. He was lucky he knew that much. When? What? Oh, Dabai looked at the printed schedule he had been given, his breath fogging in the air as it quickly grew colder out. Tonight at 10. That's what, in 5 hours. When Dabai nodded, Izuku hissed, making a mental calendar before a growl from his stomach made the decision for him. Standing, he passed the completed longboard over to Dabai. All right, then we've got plenty of time to get the basics of longboarding down on the way to Banu's and back. Sweet, they had great hash browns. Dabai grinned. The expression had a pained edge as he looked at the neon monstrosity in his hands. Tucking the board under his arm, he walked around behind the 7-11 to the empty parking lot. There was always an empty parking lot behind 7-11. Why should this one be any different? The next half hour was filled with irritated hissing and yells of "No, you fucking idiot. Why would you do that? No, your other foot. Apparently, you're a goofy bastard, so use your right foot. What the hell are you doing?" And Dabai tried his best. But working with his lanky limbs and height wasn't really going well, until it all finally clicked. Over an hour in and he finally got it, figuring out how to properly balance his weight between the trucks so he wouldn't fall and die at the first hill. It had taken Izuku shoving him with full force to find out he was more comfortable with his right foot forward, and a few more pushes to figure out how he liked to brake. Honestly, he was getting pushed around a lot more than he had thought he would be as an adult. Over an hour into the lesson, Izuku just shook his head. He had done enough. Hopping back on his own board and pushing off, Izuku waved for Dabai to follow him. Come on, let's get going, I'm starved. With a step and a push, Dabai went rolling after Izuku, the only sound between them that of wheels on pavement. He'd be back soon enough, and after that, anything could happen. Subject 0 original quirk data. Quirk type, emitter. Name, fireball. Abilities. Subject can manipulate existing flames and create a ball of fire. Either one ball of 240 mm, 297 mm, 640 mm, or 16 at 15 mm. Subject can launch and control trajectory and speed up to a 4-meter radius around self. Strength. Without an outside source of flames, quirk is essentially useless. In a setting with flames, quirk grows in power exponentially. Overall, a fairly decent powered quirk. Subject 0 augment data. Note Subject 0 is undeniable proof that emitter, morphic, and transformation quirks can be deconstructed and transplanted. My thesis was right all along. Imagine the potential this discovery holds. Take that board of ethics. Transplant one eye, left laser gazer morphic type. Electric green energy, heat beam. Difficult to control and stop. Reaches temperatures beyond 15 degrees Celsius. Note produces an extraordinary kick, nearly knocking Subject 0 across the warehouse with each use. Keep covered unless necessary. Surprisingly similar to Pro Hero X-less for a quirk coming from someone not related to the hero in any way. Transplant 2 eye, right thermal vision morphic type. Nearly identical in appearance to the subject's original eye, is capable of viewing the thermal energies of living and non-living beings. Note Subject 0 had taken an interest in watching me when I'm working. Unnerving. Keep blindfolded unless vision is necessary. Secondary note: I would have preferred to transplant the cornea itself, but it's these damnable working conditions. Transplant 3 teeth canine morphic type. Upper and lower canine sets are 1.3 centimeters in length, root to tip, and are composed of unusually dense enamel. Far sharper than human teeth, they are more reminiscent of an animal. Note Subject 0 now has a definable lisp and an increase in biting when not muzzle. Is it true? My theory on quirk types affecting the bearer's behavior. I'll need more time, a wide testing pool, more subjects, but it'll be worth it in the end. Transplant 4-tongue serpent morphic type. Lacking in taste buds, measuring over 24 centimeters from the oropharynx, with over 16 centimeters capable of extending beyond the lips. This forked tongue, working in conjunction to modified sensors in the subject's palate, is capable of scenting the air, similar to the serpents after which it was named. Note: due to the tongue's smoothness, it seems to collect saliva. Disgusting. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting with this transplant, but it seems Subject 0 has adapted well to this new tongue. Really, there is no benefit to this quirk, unless you count having no sense of taste. Second note: there's been an interesting effect between the serpent tongue and canine teeth, leaving Subject 0 capable of a wide range of hisses and snarling sounds similar to the animal on which the quirks are based. Transplant 5 arm, left flame on emitter type. Produces dark purple flames. Flames cannot move beyond 9 centimeters from the user's skin. Note: the flame color does not seem to change with the temperature and is indicative of the family the quirk was harvested from. As such, far too risky to use on a subject expected to be exposed to the public. Transplant 6 arm, right Ironsides transformation type. A result of multiple hardening quirks combined through family lines. Limb and attached tissues transform into a titanium, tungsten, steel alloy. Note: fingernails are unable to be transformed into keratin, and are the same composition as the alloy. However, they grow as if they were organic. Far too heavy to be sustainable in the long term. Replace Subject 0's spinal column with something more durable, perhaps parts of Endurance Runner. Transplant 7 lungs rebreathe morphic type. Transplant 8 heart slow beat morphic type. Transplant 9 spinal column Endurance Runner morphic type. Transplant 10 stomach acid pit morphic type. A naturally strong stomach acid, capable of breaking down extremely dense and complex items. Must test further. Note: has certainly made feeding Subject 0 much more convenient. Food costs are down. Transplant 11 legs, skeletal and muscular Endurance Runner morphic type. Transplant 12 legs, gastrocnemius muscle double jump emitter type. Transplant 13 tail scorpion whip morphic type. With 74 vertebrae and 182.88 centimeters from the base of tail to base of the venom sac. This black-furred prehensile appendage is equipped with a 370-gram venom sac and a barbed stinger of 9.2 centimeters. Subject can inject a maximum output of 180 grams of venom, and the venom sac also functions as a third kidney, assisting in filtering toxins from the bloodstream, further increasing the danger of the venom. Note: Subject 0 has had a marked increase in aggression since it was transplanted. Keep sedated until necessary. Note: bone transplants from Endurance Runner seem to have created a fascinating effect when met with blood from Scorpion Whip. Subject 0 seems to be gaining a tolerance and potential immunity to various anesthetics. Must test this further. Oi, Mikumo, let's play heroes. Sure, Kakin, we're gonna be the best. Fuck yeah, we're Team Firestarter. Don't say bad words, I don't want to get in trouble. Again, TCH, fine. Come on, let's get to the big tree before anyone else. Izuku sat bolt upright, his chest heaving as he patted down his futon, looking for an open pack of cigarettes. There was no light coming through the windows, and Dabai wasn't there, working his 3rd graveyard shift of the week, pulling his knees to his chest. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut to try and drive those bright memories back into oblivion. He didn't want to remember. He couldn't. His hand shaking. He lifted a cigarette to his lips and lighted it with dusty purple flames from his fingertip. Explosions, bright yellow flames, joy, laughter. No, not again. The first hit of nicotine threw his memories into sharp relief before the haze of apathy began to smoke over the brightness. Swallowed up in inky clouds, the memory faded back into oblivion with all the rest. It was better this way. Every dredged-up memory was like a railroad spike driving through his skull. Nicotine pulled the spike and dulled the pain, but it still ached. That hole it left behind was still there. He had nothing to fill it with. Brushing his free hand across his face, it came back wet, ever-present drool and the salty tears sizzling and evaporating when it hit the heat of his still flaming hand. He had been crying. It had been a while since that had happened. Usually the cold didn't affect him like this, not to the point of crying. Maybe he just had something in his eye. It just meant he was weak. He was still weak. TCH. Izuku hissed around the cigarette before he rolled off his bed and onto the floor. With a huff, he pushed himself up and stumbled towards the door. Picking his keys up off the table, he locked the door behind him and nearly tripped down the stairs in his rush to leave. It wasn't rational to act like this, he thought as he shivered in the cold fog of the early morning. Hunching his shoulders, he tried to conserve energy as the chill soaked through his skin. Hey, my kuumo. Let's go to the park. Fuck. Izuku let metal change his skin. And he slammed his hand into the concrete, cracking the sidewalk beside him. His fingers dug into the rubble, crushing a few pieces into dust to center himself. Why can't I just forget? It would be so much easier on him if he could just forget. He leaned back on the wall, bare bricks snagging his shirt as he slid down. He closed his eyes, his moment of emotion fading fast as the fog began to thin out. He let himself listen to the noise of the city, muffled by the dense layers of fog that drowned the light. There were the sounds of something in the garbage, rats, or something like that. Heavy wing beats. Massive. Most likely Hoyle on his way to the diner. Even through his emotions dulled by apathy, he was still amused by how Hoyle would always carry his twin brother in his talons, gripping him by the shoulders. The fact that Benu stood head and shoulders above Hoyle just made it all the funnier. Hoofbeats of those damn deer prancing through the streets like they own the city. Really, he hated those things. Always trying to eat his hair when he used to sleep outside. Following him around as if he had something for them. Woke up to one licking him once. Though when he slept in the woods, they worked as great space heaters. A few cars passing by. The street wasn't as used as the rest. Too broken down and out of the way. Too many villain attacks in too short of a time meant that even the heroes barely came by. Well, aside from Ingenium, that is. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, eyes closed, and steadily breathing. At one point, a hand ruffled through his hair, and Dabai's rough voice mumbled, "Morning, kid, MRH, and good night." From the warmth that was beginning to soak into his skin, he guessed it had to be about 8. The city was waking up, the sounds of traffic rising on adjacent streets, birds chirping and cawing, dogs barking, just the ambient noise of bustling life. Hey, none of your business. Hey. Izuku straightened up, slowly opening his eye. The girl from before was running towards him from across the street, waving excitedly. There was a stack of boxes and an ugly puce couch outside the building where she came from. Oh, he raised his tail, waving with the stinger, a flare of emotion burning through him at the excited look on the girl's face. Oh my god. Uraraka pointed at the tail, causing it to thrash wildly in reaction to the attention. So cute, she thought, comparing the expressiveness of the tail to its apathetic owner. Remembering why she had come over, she asked, "You're strong?" Yeah. Izuku's eyebrows furrowed, and he raised his right arm, flexing slightly. His tattoo moved as the muscles shifted, the orange shark seeming to swim through the gray-blue smoke. He spared the tattoo a passing glance, acknowledging the shark for what it was. Proof it wasn't his arm. At least he didn't try to yank it off his body anymore. He had gotten over that a long time ago. Uraraka pointed back across the street, gesturing to the pile of boxes and the hideous couch. "Can you help me move my couch?" She glanced away from the blank look on the other's face, wondering for a second if she would ever find out his name. Some of my parents' friends brought it over, but it's too awkward to get up the stairs. She could just use her quirk, but it wouldn't be much use getting it around the corners. And it would be super awkward to get reprimanded for public quirk use just because she wanted to make moving a couch easier. Fine. Izuku stood, his back cracking and popping with the movement. So, what floor are you on? The 3rd. Ugh. Izuku shrugged, making sure his eye patch was in place before he followed Uraraka across the street. So, your quirk is a 5-point activation, he asked idly, even though he already assumed it was. Huh. Uraraka nearly stumbled over a crack in the asphalt, turning back to none of your business in shock. How could you tell? Izuku gestured to Uraraka's hands, specifically the gloves. They were like the past pair, but a soft gray with light blue spots. They looked warm. Your gloves. They didn't have fingers, and your fingertips have those pad things, like a cat. Or if she wore black fingerless gloves, like a little possum. What sort is it? Oh, it's anti-gravity. Uraraka was surprised that her quirk activation had been figured out so quickly. and by a stranger to boot. Anything I touch is unaffected by gravity. Cool. Izuku could think of so many practical applications for a quirk like that. Too bad most of them would require a license of some sort. The laws just hadn't caught up to quirks yet. A quirk like that would be amazing for scientific fields. If it could be replicated by mechanical means, the transportation industry would be forever changed. You interested in hero work or construction? Hero. Uraraka unconsciously flexed her hands, her fingers nearly numb in the morning air. I'm gonna go to UA. UA. Before everything, Izuku would have given anything to go to UA. But now, so, this is me. Uraraka pointed to the puce nightmare. I'll grab one end. Yeah. Izuku hefted the couch up, twisting it awkwardly as he pulled it in the door, shuffling backwards up the stairs, Uraraka pushing from the other end. The staircase was narrow, but there was still enough room to squeeze through. The soft fabric of the couch aided in it. Up until the first turn, the sewn-in cushions catching the corner. Pushing the couch with both hands, Uraraka tried to force it through. Lifted higher. From behind the couch, Izuku grouched. I am. He adjusted his grip on the couch corners, tugging it towards him by centimeters. Push it harder. I'm trying. Uraraka growled, letting go to brace her shoulder against the side. Try and twist it, maybe. No, it'll break. Nah, it'll be fine. Uraraka began to twist the couch, trying to wiggle it around the corner. Ugh. Izuku stepped up one stair to avoid getting smacked in the face by the arm of the couch. Stop jerking it around. You're smashing my hand against the wall. Sorry. The two struggled the same way with the next two corners, and Izuku choked back more curses than he even thought he knew, but half of them still made it out, and Uraraka matched each and every one of them. Really, Izuku would be impressed. Once the couch was in the apartment door and set in place, Izuku just sighed heavily and shook his head. This is a really ugly couch. Yeah, I know. Uraraka shook her head with disappointment before perking back up. But it was free. Worth it then. Izuku turned to face Uraraka properly, bowing slightly before extending a hand. My name, it's Midoriya Izuku, but you can call me whatever. Nice to meet you, whatever. Uraraka grinned widely, face lighting up with excitement. We're gonna be great friends, Midoriya, I just know it. Izuku rolled his eyes so hard he was sure he caused permanent damage. Oi, Midoriya. Dabai froze, wondering for a moment why his manager was looking for Izuku before he remembered. He is a Midoriya now. Right, still getting used to that. Todoroki Tauya is dead. Long live Midoriya Dabai. He stood back up from where he had been crouched under the counter, trying to catch the spider that had eluded him for the past 3 shifts. He swears it's mocking him at this point. Yeah, boss. His manager jerked a thumb behind him, pointing out a uniformed stranger. You've been here a few weeks, so you're gonna train the new guy. Cool. It was not cool. Dabai wasn't here to train people. But it would look good for when he tries out for shift supervisor. Fine, he's talked himself into it. Train this guy, then take the practice tests for shift supervisor until he can pass them. The manager nodded, unclipping his key ring and tossing it to Dabai. I've got to get out of here. Wife needs me to pick up stuff for the kids, so I'll leave you two to it. Dabai just nodded as his manager left, watching the new guy with a critical eye as he clipped the keys to his belt. The new guy looked uncomfortable in the uniform, tugging at the collar of the green and black polo, white hair in a ridiculous style. Blue eyes, a bit taller than himself, but not much, staring at his scars the way everyone does. At least he's not trying to hide it, not choking down an expression of fear and disgust. He's just openly staring, watching him with curiosity on his face. Weird. So, I'm Midoriya Dabai, guess I'm training you. And I, the new hire, bowed deeply and dramatically, am Tabata Denjuro. Okay then. How the hell was a grown-ass man so dramatic? Who had the energy to act like that? Nice to meet you. Indeed. Oh god. This guy was just so much. Dabai just wanted his shift to be over and done with. He just wanted to go home and be as far away as possible from this dude. Hell, he'd hang out with the spider if it meant being away from all that energy. Was this what Izuku felt like all the time? Surrounded by people with ridiculous emotions and all that. This guy and his weird-ass mustache were already getting to him, and it had been less than 5 minutes. Suo, Dabai drawled, leaning against the counter, arms crossed over his chest. You ever worked graveyard before? No, I haven't. Great. You should probably grab yourself a coffee halfway through the shift, Dabai sighed, picking up his clipboard with the par list for graveyard. So, I'll handle food prep and such. We can split up the cleaning, and I'll run you through the basics of stock. Raising an eyebrow, he snarked, I assume you know how to use a broom. But of course. Ugh. Dabai rolled his eyes, not knowing just how much that action made him look like Izuku. Alright, he tucked the clipboard under his arm, gesturing for Tabata to follow him. Let's get started. Yeah. Tabata just beamed at him in response, and Dabai just wanted to be dead. 15 minutes into explaining procedures to the most enthusiastic trainee, and Dabai is ready to pull his hair out by the dyed roots. He needs a smoke, then his inhaler, then a nice coffin to top it all off. I'm going out for a smoke. Dabai glanced to the clock, then out to the empty parking lot before he turned to the back exit. If my son comes by while I'm on break, let me know. Tabata froze, expression unreadable. ... You have a child? He's 13. Dabai frowned, thinking that he should warn Tabata about Izuku's standard behavior. And a little jerk. Don't let him insult you, he'll never stop. He sounds delightful. That's a fucking word for it. Dabai just shook his head as he headed outside, leaning against the brick wall and lighting his cigarette with a fingertip. He brought it up to his lips, taking a drag and sighing as the nicotine hit his lungs. A few breaths later, and he's beginning to relax, slumping heavy against the wall as he closes his eyes. Izuku kept telling him he needed to stop smoking these things for his health, but then he went and smoked half a pack a day like a fucking hypocrite. But whenever Dabai called him out on it, he would spout something about smoke-proof lungs and nicotine being the only drug he could use, then threaten him with violence. Well, at least if the kid was smoking, he couldn't eat raw chicken nuggets in front of him. Blowing out a cloud of smoke, Dabai looked out into the thick fog covering the city, the streetlights glowing yellow and doing nothing to cut through the haze. He can see the dark shapes of a few deer cross the street, and he shudders, remembering how a deer had tried to follow him home just the day before. Fucking long-legged city rats. Oh shit, was it looking at him? Was he cursed by deer? Could that happen? What did it want? Did it want him dead? Oh god, what if it did? The sound of hooves on pavement snapped him back to reality, watching the deer walk away into the fog as if they had never been there in the first place. Creepy, he muttered as he finished his cigarette, dropping the filter to the ground and crushing it under his heel. He turns back to the door, knowing he shouldn't leave his new trainee alone on graveyard. Anything could happen this late at night. Oh great, he thinks as soon as he gets to the front counter, the front door opening with a swoosh. Have you guys seen a hero? Dabai just groans, taking in the sight of a man in a black and gray mask carrying a bag that was probably stuffed full of money if Dabai knew how criminals work. He doesn't, but that's not stopping him from jumping to conclusions. No, Dabai shook his head once, narrowing his eyes at the obvious criminal. Seriously, who wears a mask like that after the crime? Take it off in an alley, you amateur. Now buy something or get out. You got? Dabai glanced to the clock. 5 minutes before I light you on fire. He set both hands flat on the counter before he let orange sparks and tendrils of smoke rise from his scarred skin, staring straight ahead into the criminal's face as he did. He didn't look down at his hands, knowing that if he showed any of the fear he felt towards his own fire, he would never be taken seriously. Ew. The criminal blinked slowly, watching Dabai and his hands with a wary eye. You're not going to call the police. Not if you buy something. Oh, okay. The criminal frowned enough for the expression to be seen through the mask. Can I get a coffee and a HM? What here is good? Nothing. It's 7:11. Dabai snarked as he passed the masked man the cup for his coffee. Huh. Wow, those taquitos look fucked. I'll have 3. Dabai just shrugged and picked up the tongs. Your funeral, man. Thanks. The villain grinned under their mask, reaching into their bag and pulling out a wad of cash. Here, how much? Dabai handed over the bag taquitos, tapping the purchase into the register. 875. He took the wad of cash, counting it and handing back the change. Need a receipt. ... No. Why would you even ask that? I'm a criminal, I litter. No, I don't. I'm an upstanding citizen. The criminal shot the two of them a thumbs up before skipping out the door. You'll have a good night. Tabata waved awkwardly before turning to Dabai with a confused look. Was that normal? Normal as we get out here, Dabai answered, opening the register and putting the cash inside before closing the door with a click. Takes all kinds, he muttered, grabbing himself a cup for coffee. It's only been 10 minutes after the criminal has left, and Dabai is so done. Villains, heroes, crazies, animals that trick the door sensor. He gets all kinds on graveyard, but he's about to lose it right now. Have either of you seen a villain? The hero just swans in here, and he's probably been going door to door, knocks over a display case with their cape, and now wants to ask questions. Fuck that. Nope. Dabai glanced to Tabata, narrowing his eyes slightly and giving the tiniest shake of his head. No, Tabata questioned before leaning forward on the counter and asking, what they do? Robbed an ATM. Dabai scoffed and crossed his arms over his chest. That's it. Why do they need a hero for an ATM smash? Just call the cops. You'll call the police if you see them. Yes. No fucking way. I ain't a snitch, Dabai snapped back, uncrossing his arms. Alright, wait, huh? The hero looked at him incredulously, having never run into a civilian who wasn't willing to give a hero whatever they wanted. Bitch, this is Hasu. Dabai rolled his eyes so hard he was worried he pulled something. He gestured out the front windows to the dark city streets. You know what they call these 10 blocks? No man's land. He shook his head, leaning back onto nothing in a move he had learned from Izuku. If I called the cops on every criminal I saw, half the neighborhood would be in jail. Well, the hero chewed their lip, their hands clenching into a fist a little too quickly. buy something or get out, Tabata interrupted, watching Dabai curiously. You got 5 minutes. Fine, the hero spat, turning on their heel. You don't have to be so rude. The rest of the shift passed without incident, the sun burning the thick fog away by the time the day shift comes to take their place. Dabai and Tabata are standing in the back parking lot, Dabai leaning against the wall and smoking his second cigarette. Why didn't you tell him where that guy went? I've had heroes called on me just because of my face, Dabai muttered, and that had been an awkward conversation. No, Mr. Hero, I'm not a villain, I just look like this. And the third time it had happened, Dabai decided he was never leaving his little piece of Hasu again. Everyone outside of No Man's Land was so damn judgmental. You can say I don't really trust them to always do the right thing, he finished. Gesturing with his cigarette, he asked, what about you? You didn't have to back me up in there. Well, it was just an ATM robbery. Tabata shook his head. Heroes should deal with actual villains, not people just trying to get by. You know what, Tabata? Dabai stepped up on his longboard. You're not half bad. I'm looking forward to working with you. Izuku leaned against the wall next to Uraraka's apartment building's front door, a glare in his uncovered eye and a nearly burnt-out cigarette dangling from his fingers. He's been waiting for almost an hour now, but now that he cares, he knows he's going to do stupid things like this all the time. Wanting to be around people, spend time with them. What a waste of time. He didn't get anything out of it, other than a headache and a stomach aching from feelings he's swallowed down and tried to destroy. Having seen Uraraka's apartment, he wants to help. He knows how it is to live on the razor's edge of poverty, and he wants to fix it. Make it easier on the only person his own age he's spent time with. So here he is, somehow going to help out by lurking in a way most would call weird and threatening. He called it caring. Unfortunately, with how little he feels, he doesn't even think of how terrifying or creepy he looks right now with the smoke from his cigarette clouded around him like a shroud. The shadows from the eaves hiding his face even in the bright light of the day. His forked tongue flicked out, picking up a scent through the haze. Citrus, rice and egg, thin atmosphere, muffled, but still able to be scented from behind the front door. Izuku took a final drag off his cigarette, blowing a thick cloud of smoke and stepping forward as soon as Uraraka stepped through the door. Do you want a job? Murderer. I don't want to die. It's you. Uraraka grasped the doorframe, the panic slowly draining from her stance and shoulders as she leaned heavily against the metal. She glared with as much anger as she could muster, her hands balling into fists. Why would you do that? Do you want a job? Izuku asked again, stubbing out the cigarette in his palm and flicking it to the sidewalk. I know somewhere that's hiring. Uraraka blinked in confusion, still on guard from the surge in adrenaline. What? You know that diner down the street? Izuku pointed towards Banu's with his tail. Banu's. She's been there a few times since moving into the area. The regulars and locals all seem to see the place as something close to sacred. She just didn't see it yet. Yeah, Izuku nodded once. They just fired a host for skimming from the till. Do you want a job there? Yes. Ochako grinned, her excitement almost knocking Midoriya back a few steps and through the wall. I need walking cash, and regular cash. Our girl is stone cold broke, straddling the poverty line, edging closer to the abyss of destitution. Izuku's tone was bland, too cold to be conversational, but Uraraka had been talking to him on and off for almost a week now, mostly early in the morning or late at night, but she was used to it. At first, she had thought he was angry at her, but she was starting to think that's just how he was. That maybe his apathy wasn't an act, he just couldn't care. And maybe it's easier for both of them this way. Less distracting feelings getting in the way. I can be a reference, Izuku said with a hiss. The fuck? Izuku thought. As soon as he said the words, why the hell did I just offer to do that? Stop caring, you moron. His tail thrashed in annoyance, and he jammed his hands deeper into his pockets, an unfamiliar feeling building and burning on his cheeks. If you need me to be. Uraraka raised her eyebrows, motioning to her clothes in a sweeping motion. Should I change? Izuku just blinked before gesturing to his own clothes. Torn jeans and a sleeveless hoodie with suspicious stains that were either coffee or blood. Or maybe both. He pulled the fabric of his hoodie up, taking a deep sniff. Inconclusive. Blood or coffee, blood or coffee. He's getting more cigarettes than anything else. And dumpster juice. Bit of corn. I don't think I'm the best judge of fashion, he finally said. No, you look like a disaster, Uraraka said bluntly. And you smell like one too. Cigarettes and corn. Izuku's lip twisted in a facsimile of a smile. Thank you. He froze when he realized he had been doing the equivalent of grinning wildly at someone he barely tolerated. He blinked rapidly, his one uncovered eye fluttering as he tried to figure out what to say. We should go. Lead the way, my not at all odd friend. I'm not your friend. Of course. Uraraka nodded gravely, fighting to keep the laughter out of her voice. I'm just a stranger that you're helping get a job. She bit her tongue to keep from losing her composure, a bright gleam in her eyes. I'm sure you'd do that for every stranger. Yes, Izuku wasn't willing to admit how right she was. He had done the exact same for Dabai. and he was starting to wonder who else he would do this for. No, there would be no one else. He was fine with his little world just being the few skaters and legits he knew and his across-the-street neighbor. His tail betrayed his inner thoughts. Those stomped down and unfelt emotions. His lip twisted when he felt the black fur of his tail brush against something warm. Something soft and warm. Something soft, warm, and moving. All cute. Uraraka raised her arm, lifting the coil of black fur and shaking it in Izuku's direction. Not cute, he hissed, looking away. Izuku's face burnt and deep in his chest bloomed a searing spiral of what he assumed was some feeling he didn't understand or want. Give that back, he muttered, tugging on his tail to try to unravel it with no success. Fuck, Uraraka giggled, patting the stinger where it was settled against the back of her hand. Looks like I'm keeping it. Izuku just rolled his eyes and ducked his head down, the curls of his hair falling over his face and masking his flush and shadow. He jammed his hands into his pockets and stalked away, not looking up from the sidewalk, all but dragging Uraraka behind him on his way to the diner. By the time the two of them reached Benu's, Izuku had finally untwined his tail from around Uraraka's arm, and he pushed the door open, stepping into warmth and the smell of cooking food. From behind the counter, Hoyle called out, waving with far too much energy for this early in the morning. Midoriya. Izuku nodded once, holding the door open for Uraraka to follow him inside. Hoyle grinned, turning around and taking something off the shelf behind him. He turned back and all but slammed a glass onto the countertop, an evil look in his eye. Drink this, and your meal is free. What is it? Izuku asked, stepping closer to try and get a good look. Whatever it was yellow. Very yellow. And thick. Don't worry about it, Hoyle said, brushing away the question with a flap of his wings, the downforce from the motion ruffling the hair of everyone in the building. Good thing I've built up an immunity to roofies, Izuku said matter-of-factly, shrugging and stepping fully up to the counter. Hoyle all but squawked, an undignified seagull-like sound. It's not roofies, why do you always say that? Yeesh, making me sound like some kinda, never mind, each. Hoyle waved off his own words before he shoved the cup forward, crossing his arms over his chest and fluffing his wings in irritation. Just drink it, and you can order whatever you want for free. Izuku took the offered cup, forked tongue flicking out and catching the scent of mustard. Nothing but mustard. He glanced into the glass before raising an eyebrow and tossing back a gulp of pure mustard. Good thing he doesn't have taste buds, but that doesn't mean he can't smell it. And the texture. It's horrific, and combined with the smell, it makes his eyes water and his nose sting. But he powers through it, finishing the glass before flipping the empty glass upside down and setting it on the counter with a fanged grin. It was an empty expression, feigned cockiness and self-satisfaction. Wow. Hoyle laughed loudly, the sound more like an eagle's screech than laughter. His crest rose until the feathers stood like a crown on his head. That's super cool every time. What was that? Uraraka asked hesitantly, not believing what she had just seen. The smell, the color, it couldn't be what she thought it was, right? How could he drink that without any reaction? Mustard, Izuku answered flatly, his forked tongue darting out and scenting the air, still catching nothing but mustard. Great, looks like today everything is going to smell like mustard. Hoyle just laughed his screeching laugh, gripping the counter tightly, sharp nails digging into the formica surface. Uraraka just blinked, seriously reconsidering her possibly working here. If the owners are this crazy, what does that mean for her? Why? It's funny, Hoyle snickered, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. It makes my meals free. Izuku blinked, looking away as his face burned with unknown emotion. Maybe that's not the best reason. It sure ain't, you dumbass, Hoyle responded, his crest still standing high. He snapped his fingers, an idea forming. Next time, it's gonna be blended day-old turkey bacon. Sounds disgusting, I'll do it. It wasn't like he would taste it, anyway. I'm sure you will, the other mumbled before straightening up and watching the two teenagers a little more seriously. So, what are you doing here? As much fun as he had with Midoriya, he had the feeling the kid wasn't here just to drink mustard and eat free food. And he knew the feeling wasn't mutual. He might be having a good time, but Midoriya was never having a good time. Izuku nodded, gesturing back to Uraraka. Hoyle, this is Uraraka. Oh, hello. Hoyle blinked and turned his yellow gaze to its new target. Uraraka almost flinched under the intense stare. She nervously clenched one hand into a fist at her side before clearing her throat and taking a step forward. Midoriya said you had a job available? She straightened her back, taking a step forward, and trying to project confidence. I know I'm only 14 right now, but I'm a hard worker. Hoyle raised an eyebrow, trying not to laugh at the sight. Such intensity. He remembered being that young, feeling like you could take on the world. Can you write orders? Uraraka nodded, her confidence building higher when she wasn't immediately refused. Yes, Hoyle nodded, glancing over to Midoriya, the green-haired teen leaning against the counter, not paying attention to anything that was going on around him. If the young skater trusted her, well, that was a good enough reference for him. And can you cook? Yeah, sort of. She made a vague hand gesture, thinking of her cooking. If it was something simple, she could cook it. But she had never really had the opportunity to cook more complex dishes, never having the time or money for the ingredients. And why do you want this job? Because I'm broke. Uraraka felt her face flush with embarrassment when she admitted that she was living on the poverty line. And I don't want my parents to have to keep paying for my way through life. You're honest, better than most people I've talked to. With a shrug, Hoyle turned around, shouting across the service window and into the kitchen, wings flaring widely as he did. "BNU, we've got a new hire. Come out and say hello." Less than a heartbeat later, the door to the kitchen swung open, Benu ducking down and stepping through. "Shut up," Benu grumbled, waving a spatula towards his brother. "Benu, this is..." "Wait, what's your name?" Benu rolled his eyes, crossing his arms over his chest. This was just like his brother. Hire someone he knows nothing about. Why not? Sounds reasonable. But he didn't voice his opinion. "Uraraka Achako, but you can call me your new employee." "Oh ho." Hoyle hopped in place. "Benu, I like her." Benu just nodded, frowning as he tried to put together the schedule, mentally adjusting the hours of himself and the rest of the kitchen staff. No more needing the busboy to work up at the front. No more dipshit dish pit workers trying to wash tables and failing miserably. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow." She shrugged, excitement beginning to stir her blood. Was this really real? Was this really happening? "I live down the street," she turned, pointing back towards her apartment. "About 2 blocks that way." "Well," Hoyle said, reaching back behind the counter and pulling out 2 menus. "You and Midoriya order whatever you want. My brother and I will get the paperwork started." He handed the menus over, following his brother back into the kitchen. Uraraka looked down at the menu, unsure of where to even start. "Midoriya, what's good here?" "Everything, I guess." Even though Izuku couldn't taste, he could still smell it. That and the texture was enough to give him a hint on how it was supposed to taste. It wasn't the same, but he liked it. But he still couldn't wait for food to be available in pill form. "I like their pancakes and the hash browns." "You can't go wrong with the food here unless you hate flavor." "Speaking of flavor," she asked, sitting beside Midoriya at the counter, "how did you drink that much mustard and not do anything about it?" Izuku hissed, his tongue flicking out. "No taste buds." "Oh, then how do you know if the food is good?" she asked, while simultaneously thinking about what other things Midoriya could eat without reacting to. If she horribly burned her own dinner, she could just give it to him, right? "I can still smell everything." He blinked before leaning forward, putting more emphasis into it. "Everything." Achako blinked, the gears of her mind turning as she struggled to understand what he meant. Then she watched as Midoriya pointed discreetly towards a cuddling couple sitting in the corner, and it clicked. "Oh, you, exactly." He rolled his eyes, adding on that, "and this place is loved by the entire neighborhood." He wouldn't tell her that almost 1/8 of the entire neighborhood were skaters and legits. And they only came here because Hoyle and Benu were like the rest of them, hiding in plain sight. He just stayed quiet, looking over the menu as if he didn't have the entire thing memorized already. "If you don't want regular diner food, you should order the kashari, or the sabanik." "What are those?" "The specialties." He reached over and flipped the menu over in Uraraka's hands. "Read the back of the menu, it explains everything." "Oh," Achako flushed, setting to read the back page, her interest spiking as she looked over the different dishes she had never even heard of before. She had never really given a thought to Egyptian cuisine. And now, she was interested, but it might not be the best time to try something new. She settled on prime rib hash with 2 eggs and a glass of orange juice, memorizing her order for when Hoyle came back with the paperwork for her to start working. Beside her, Izuku was staring at the wall, ignoring his menu entirely. And ignoring everything else, it seemed. Uraraka waved a hand in front of his face. "No reaction." "Midoriya," she asked, prodding his shoulder. "You in there?" Izuku blinked, still staring at the wall as he tried to ignore the wall of scent around him. It was easier if he didn't talk and tried to keep his tongue inside his head. No, he could deal with the scent of nicotine, of rotting garbage, but give him people, and he would rather be anywhere else. If only his tongue, the quirk of serpent, hadn't been more than just a cosmetic quirk, he wouldn't have to smell chemicals. Pheromones. Ugh, human bodies are disgusting. Okay. When Midoriya lapsed back into silence, Achako pulled her hand away from where it was still touching his arm, and she frowned. "You know, you're an interesting guy." Jerked back to reality by that statement, Izuku looked to Uraraka in faux confusion. "Am I?" Uraraka nodded. "Yeah, you claim not to be my friend, then you take me to get a job and have all these people who just listen to you." She shrugged, figuring the best way to put her thoughts into words. "People like you, even if you act like you don't like them." Maybe she was jealous, just a little bit. "I don't know how to like people," Izuku admitted, knowing that saying that should make him ashamed. "I don't feel emotions. I don't have them." He shrugged. Maybe they were still there, the physical sensations at the least. Oh, that's what she had thought. But hearing it, actually knowing it, was different. She couldn't begin to imagine a life like that. But here Midoriya was, living it. Well, she began, even if you don't feel, you're still likable. Really? He turned in his seat, staring at Uraraka with the echo of surprise beating in his chest. Are you sure? Most people seem to think the opposite. They would see his expressionless face, the way his words were flat and unfeeling, and they would shudder in discomfort. They would cross the street to stay away from him, sit in different subway cars, leaving him on his own surrounded by empty seats. An animal in human skin. He shook his head, hating the emotions that bloomed, burned, flared, and fizzled into nothing in the space of a heartbeat. Contentment, happiness. That's so hard to find. Optimism. It would be easier if they simply didn't exist, instead of burning then snuffing themselves out. Unsure, Uraraka decided then and there that Izuku was more than he seemed to be. Nicer than he wanted everyone to think he was. She patted the back of Izuku's hand once. You might just think we're neighbors, but you're a real friend, Midoriya. Izuku sighed, clenching his fist before closing his eyes and thinking about how that made him wish his emotions were more than just echoes. Having real friendship. He couldn't remember how it felt. Maybe he didn't want to remember how it felt. His hand felt warm. Maybe he needed a new feeling. He's something different now. It just makes sense it should feel different now. Paperwork is sorted. Just needs to be filled out. Hoyle popped up from behind the counter, his approach given away by the massive wings on his back. He wasn't really built for stealth. He dropped a decent-sized packet of paperwork in front of Uraraka before settling back with a grin. So, what can we make for ya? Achacho rattled off her order. Hoyle just nodded, not even needing to write it down before he called it back to the kitchen. While Midoriya just mumbles under his breath, Hoyle catching the sound by some miracle. Oh, surprise you. We'll do our best. With that, Hoyle all but waltzes back into the kitchen, leaving the two teenagers with a stack of paperwork and a pen. Uraraka slowly pulled the stack of papers towards herself, the reality of the situation finally sinking in ... That's a lot of paper. You ever had to fill it out? No, this is my first job. This was really happening. Her first real job that wasn't helping out neighbors with pets. This was real, legitimate work. Okay. Izuku leaned over, picking up the pen and tapping the first blank. I'll help you out, he grumbled, leaning in close and explaining anything that didn't make sense. Uraraka filled the silence between his mumbled answers and assistance with stories, telling him about how she wanted to be a hero, how she wanted to help her family. She didn't ask for anything in return, giving away her words freely. Even with his lack of emotional knowledge, he knew he was content. Long after he got back from Banu's, Izuku is standing in the middle of an empty street, the descending sun in his eyes as he types out a message. Scorpion is online. Scorpion, you want venom? Black box, yo, I'm available to buy. How much you sellin'? Scorpion, 15 milliliters. Meet me behind the rope and pony. Black box, 15 fucking milliliters? And why the fuck we meeting behind a strip club? Scorpion, 20 minutes. Black box, you're a real weirdo, Scorpion. Scorpion is offline. Izuku rolled his eyes, pocketing his phone as he ducked through back alleys and abandoned streets. This part of Hasu so run down that heroes didn't patrol here, and the cops would never come. He kept his head down and hands in his pockets as he passed graffiti, flaming wolf skulls covering up a snake with 3 heads, and ignored the signs of past fights. Wasn't any of his business who the snake heads tangled with. He would nod to the business owners and such who called his name as he passed by shuttered storefronts with open signs taped to the steel storm shutters that covered the windows, waved to the gaggle of kids that ran down the street and around him. He was lucky the kids had seen him often enough they stopped stealing his wallet whenever he walked by. The glare of neon lights and music even he considered sleazy permeated through the next block, and he curled his lip at the sight of it. The rope and pony. Unfortunately, people knew him there. The bartenders and the dancers, even the security staff. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't some creep who went to strip clubs, he just acted as a bouncer sometimes. Something about his face seemed to keep people in line. There was that, and most people didn't expect to see a 14-year-old outside the dressing room of a strip club. Walk some of the dancers home at night. No man's land is a dangerous place to walk alone. Besides, usually, the only teenagers they would let in were working on the stage. Instead of going inside, he nodded to the familiar bouncer outside the front door, steering himself around the building to the back. He leaned against the exposed brick of the back wall, all but hidden in the shadows as he waited to make another sale. The weight of the full glass vial heavy in his pocket along with the weight of emotions he refused to face. After hearing what Uraraka had said about her family, wanting to be a hero to give them an easier life, something in him burned at that, remembering his own. No, remembering them back when they were still a family. He might not be able to understand the emotions anymore, but he remembered how they felt. That warmth. It used to be so easy back then. But now, he was always cold. Physically, emotionally. After everything, it was as if he couldn't not be cold. Even with how much he cared, he was still cold. But with the money, he could fake warmth. Give gifts and small tokens to show he cared. Pretend he remembered how it felt until he could force himself to feel it. filled the flames under the echoes of emotion until he burned with it. The thought of feeling again. He didn't like it, but he knew it would happen one way or another, and he would rather push himself there on his own terms than be dragged kicking and screaming into the fire of human emotion. Scorpion, Izuku hissed, dragging himself out of his thoughts. That didn't happen. He was usually better at paying attention. He stepped forward out of the shadows, standing behind Black Box. Right here. Oh, sweet Jesus. Black Box spun around, silver eyes wide as he clasped a hand to his chest, nearly falling back in his shock. Don't do that. Izuku flicked his forked tongue, one eyebrow raising as a spark of feeling flared and faded in his throat. Black Box sucked his teeth, taking a step forward and away from the fading circle of his portal. Do you really have 15 milliliters of venom? Why would I lie? Izuku spread his hands, palms open, proving he had nothing to hide. The broker/drug dealer nodded, trying and failing to keep the excitement from his face. With the amount of venom he's been selling, he could take a break for almost a year. So, 15 milliliters, that's over 12 million. It is 12 million. Izuku knew he could get more out of the deal, but this money wasn't for him. He was 10 months ahead on rent and had enough in his grocery fund to last the entire time. Christ, kid. Black Box tried to envision what was being done with this sort of money. What the hell was he doing with it? He had to ask. What sort of lifestyle are you trying to fund? Black Box muttered, reaching into a shadow and pulling out a briefcase. Instead of responding, Izuku just stared, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a medium-sized vial. He held it up to the light, dull yellow lamp light bending around the vial, showing the thick substance clinging to the inside of the glass. Black Box swallowed thickly, trying not to stare as he patted blindly at the lock on the briefcase. It's all here, 12 million and 5,000 yen notes. He opened the briefcase, showing stacks of cash, enough money that someone could restart their life. He realized this is well over 15,000 doses. Yeah, so I can sell each batch of 5 doses to bankers and high society brats for insane markups. You're making me rich and every other drug dealer infinitely jealous. Sometimes he wondered why Scorpion didn't just sell the venom himself. But hey, he was making money hand over fist, so there was no reason to dwell on hypotheticals. Whatever. Izuku shrugged, not seeing the need to repeat himself. Make sure the vial is destroyed once empty, or at least wipe it of my fingerprints. Yeah. Black Box rolled his eyes, passing over the briefcase as Scorpion pressed the vial into his hand. I would never forget that. Make sure you don't, Izuku grumbled, turning on his heel and tightening his grip on the briefcase as he left the dingy alley behind. There was nothing to tie him to any of the crimes he had done, and he had no reason to believe otherwise. Had no reason to imagine that somewhere in Musutafu, there was a frazzled detective trying to chase any sort of leads for the drug that had cropped up in Hasu and spread across Tokyo like wildfire. Izuku wonders for a moment if the bicycle is excessive. Top of the line, 11-gear mountain bike with a little yellow basket and a ridiculously sparkly neon pink paint job. If he could feel pride, Izuku would be proud of how much of an eyesore it is. Pushing the bike across the street, Izuku takes out his phone with one hand, sending out a quick text. Midoriya Izuku is online. Midoriya Izuku, come outside. Uraraka is online. Uraraka, why? Midoriya Izuku, I got you something. It was expensive. Uraraka is offline. Izuku raised his eyebrows, stowing his phone when he heard the slamming of a door and the sound of someone rushing down the stairs. Oh my God! A loud shriek pierced the air, and Izuku nudged the kickstand into place, letting the bike stand on its own. I love it. Uffed. Izuku braced himself as Uraraka slammed into him at high speeds, the two of them hitting the ground in the middle of the empty street. Geez, grapple much? Oh, you wished I grappled. Izuku pushed Uraraka off of him, rolling to his feet. I just thought you could use it to get to and from work easier. Aw, you're so sweet. No, he hissed, forked tongue flicking out while brushing the rocks and dirt off his clothes. I was just... Izuku looked away, not finishing his thought. Uraraka laughed, slapping Izuku's arm. You kinda trailed off there, buddy. I'm not your buddy, Izuku replied, not even faking emphasis on the words. He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. Anyway, I gotta get out of here. Me too, I gotta get to work. On my new bike. Uraraka pulled Midoriya into a quick embrace, letting him go almost as quickly as it had begun. See you later, Midoriya. Izuku waved as Uraraka walked her new bike across the street, turning back to his own apartment. He had plans in Musutafu in a few hours. The places where Uraraka's arms had wrapped around him felt a lingering warmth, even as he crossed the street and went inside. When was the last time he had been hugged by someone that wasn't an excitable bird with boundary issues? Years. Even in skater communities, he had an air of unapproachability that kept nearly everyone away. And that's how he liked it. But now, it's something he's hesitantly ready to describe as lonely. He pushed that from his head, not liking how dwelling on the subject made his chest ache. Coming up the stairs, Izuku thought about his last conversation with Dabai about skaters with quirks and appearances that made anonymity impossible. Like the both of them, The scars and, well, even more scars made them both stand out. "Hey, old man," he called out, pushing the door open and kicking it closed behind him. From the other side of the room came Dabai's response, "I'm not old." Izuku waved away Dabai's protests. Sure. This is your weekend. Yeah. Denjiro is in charge of night shift while I'm gone." Dabai didn't mention how he felt about that, but a word he would have used was stressed, or maybe anxious. Izuku bent down, picking up a hoodie from the pile on the floor, his forked tongue flicking out to take in the scent. "Not bad." He pulled it on, picking up another hoodie and throwing it at Dabai's head. "Grab your board, we're heading to the skate park." Dabai looked up from his book, eyebrows furrowed before he dogered the page he was on, setting his book down. Why did it sound like skate park was capitalized? "Because it's an important place," Izuku responded cryptically, grinning sharply. "You make me so anxious so often." "Good. Keep you wary." Izuku pointed to the stacks of medications on the coffee table. "Don't forget your inhaler." "Right, thanks." Dabai picked up one of his inhalers from his half of the coffee table, shoving it into his jeans pocket before pausing, taking another, and putting it in the pocket of his hoodie. Turning to Izuku, he asked, "So, where we going?" Izuku grabbed his wallet from the coffee table, taking a quick look over his cash before nodding and finally answering. "Misutafu, the birthplace of skaters." "Oh, cool." Dabai double-checked that he had everything with him, grabbing his keys before he locked the door behind him. "I was wondering about that." Dabai followed Izuku out of the apartment building, talking all the while. "There's no mention of where it is in the skater's Bible, so this is like a secret quest. I wish I had a sword. Though, I'm not cool enough to be a knight. Maybe a rogue. So I need a dagger. Or a crossbow." Izuku tuned him out, heading towards the train station. He was not looking forward to listening to this for 40 minutes. Seriously. That beach was a mess. What's with that? Dabai asked himself, not even expecting an answer at this point. Izuku had been ignoring him for the entire trip. And even now, he was ignoring him. His patience straining. Izuku walked up to the windswept willow, ducking under its drooping branches. Following closely, Dabai brushed aside a few branches. The difference between this spot of nature and the rot of the beach less than a kilometer away, a stark contrast. The tree seemed odd, as if it was more ancient than what he could understand. The noise of the road only a few yards away was shut out. There was an odd silence, no sounds of buzzing insects, and the wind seemed to stop. "What is this?" "It's a tree," Izuku said sarcastically, brushing his fingertips against the bark. "Impossibly smooth." Dabai stomped down his questions, looking down at the base of the trunk. There was something jutting from the soil, a few roots tangled around the object. "Is that a longboard sticking in the ground?" "Yeah, skate or die, Nat." Izuku reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny plastic bag. "Oh my god, is that marijuana?" "Don't be such a stiff." Dabai folded his arms, frustratedly. "I'm not a narc." "I didn't call you a narc." Izuku crouched down, brushing the dirt and fallen leaves off of the concrete the longboard was sunk into. There was a small plaque with a nonsensical inscription on it. The real message was etched into the board itself. Dabai leaned down, reading the inscription aloud. "My life was bitchin', thanks, Nat." He straightened back up, unable to stop from asking another question. Who was Nat? He wrote the skater's Bible, all the commandments, all the notes in the margins, even the notes that made no sense, and even the ones that were just stony ramblings or recipes for weird foods. So he wrote. Dabai pulled his copy out of his jacket, opening it to a marked page. He traced his finger along the page until he found the right point in the heavily inked margin. "The heart beats on doors it should never open." With a shrug, Izuku tried to explain. People thought it was important to record everything he said and wrote. He paused, weighing his words before continuing. "Even the sappy shit." Izuku snorted, brushing the last of the grime away from the makeshift memorial. Flipping up the metal of the plaque where it was hinged, there was a small glass pipe in the compartment built into the concrete base. Izuku opened the bag in his hand, loading the bowl of the pipe before placing it back in its compartment. "I call this Nat's full pipe," he chuckled. Even though he lacked emotions, he could appreciate a good pun. See, he was a genuine skater before he became a skater. Dabai nodded. "I think I read part of that." "In the margins," Izuku clarified. "Yeah, in the margins." Dabai nodded thoughtfully, closing the skater's Bible. "Is there something poetic about that? Maybe it was the point of margins to hold the most important things." "I don't know anything about poetry," Izuku admitted. He stood, brushing some of the dirt off of his pants, missing most of it. "It requires heart. You have heart." "Oh sure, I have a heart. But not heart." Dabai stowed his copy of the skater's Bible away. "Is there really a difference?" This conversation was getting too emotional for comfort. Whatever, we've paid our respects, let's get going." Izuku pushed aside more drooping branches and stepped off the barely beaten path, a scarcely noticeable stone trail leading into the bushes. Following closely, Dabai watched where he placed his feet, careful of clutching roots and binding branches in the dense underbrush. So, where is the skate park? Izuku grinned, his entire being seeming to light up with something genuine. It's just a little bit further, you're gonna love this. He reached back, dragging Dabai behind him by the sleeve as he pushed aside the thorny branches of the thicket. The path changed from deliberately placed rocks to lichen and weed-covered concrete. The brush thinned out, replaced by a fence built of what looked like scrap from the beach a kilometer away. Past the fence, it was like an entirely different world. Though, my God, Dabai froze, trying to take in the sheer enormity of everything he saw. What is this place? This, Izuku gestured with a flourish, is the skate park. It was beautiful, the towering mass of concrete and twisted steel, old junk cars and trucks welded together, shipping containers stacked on ancient buses, and even a train car or two thrown into the mix. An entire apartment building worth of material turned inside out with the life on the outside of it. Strung with lights, the throng of life seemed to hum over the entire place. Around the massive mountain of homes in the center were small stalls, rows upon rows of plants growing and thriving. 3 sides were walled in by dense thorn bushes, but one side was open to the ocean, vast and glittering, full of promise and potential. Even the water seemed full of life. A few roughly made boats on its surface, and what looked like ancient tower cranes were hanging over the water, a net in the hook of one and the others in motion. Lights were strung over the entire place, some of them simple strings of Christmas lights in all colors. Some of them were out in entire patches, some of them seemed to shine so brightly they were blinding even in the bright light of day. There was an arch, and dozens of stoplights hung on it, some of them stuck on a bright yellow or a glowing green, and others rapidly strobing between red, yellow, and green with not even a second between each change. And the third was somehow shining a bright blue. There were solar panels on every available surface, absorbing the sun's rays and powering the hub of skater culture. Around the edges of the micro-city, where the fences were connected to make one continuous barrier, there were wind turbines built from scrap, slowly spinning in the coastal breezes. But most amazing of all were the people, appearances ranging from average to extraordinary. Some people having nothing more distinct than an extra set of eyes, to the woman with the head of an antelope and the person who seemed to be entirely composed of liquid metal. But there were so many of them, and there was just such a sense of community and family. All of these people knew who they were, knew where they stood in the world. The smell of baking bread and cooking meat wafted over the entire place, and the sound of laughter. It felt like a home. Not the cold house Dabai had come from, but a real home. Somewhere that people cared and loved. Somewhere people belonged. So, this is the skate park. It was more than he had expected. Actually, Dabai hadn't been sure what to expect, but this still surpassed his expectations. It was over the size of a city block. Almost twice the size, even. Yeah, anytime you're in trouble, this is the place to go. Izuku took his first step over the threshold of the different world, almost having to drag Dabai behind him to pull him out of his shock. People come here when there's nowhere else. Retired minor villains and vigilantes. Hammerhead lives here, you know. Dabai's breath left his lungs in a rush. Hammerhead. How the hell is Hammerhead a minor villain? He took over all of Kyoto for over 7 days. He shook his head, trying to force himself to get past that point. He would have to ask about that later. Please, Hammerhead was a revolutionary. His spider bots alone were technological marvels. He's the reason mutation quirks are even allowed in heroics. Yeah, because Japan didn't want something like that to ever happen again. And the fact that he had been an active villain for the past 40 years even after his escape from Tartarus before he just dropped off the grid. Not like it was advertised as an escape. After all, he was the only person to ever escape from Tartarus. Officially, he was still a prisoner. And if civilians called in claiming to see the biggest, literally and metaphorically, villain in all of Japan, they were just brushed off. A walking shark. No, you must be seeing things. He's basically just villain gang Orca, Dabai continued, shaking his head. Fuck you, he was great, Izuku hissed, not even faking the heat in his words. Hammerhead might have been a villain, but he wasn't a bad guy. And he was on the scene 40 years before Orca came around. So Hammerhead is here. I thought he was in prison for life, Dabai muttered before speaking up. And speaking of here, what even is here? It used to be a container port for what's that hero? Izuku snapped his fingers, furrowing his brows as he tried to recall the name. Jeans, best jeanist. He moved his production companies overseas to keep up with denim demands. And once he moved, other heroes got in on it. Then the hero gear and tech people started leaving, really fucked this region hard. Even Dabai hadn't known about that. So how on earth did a teenager? How did you know all that? No reason. Fuck off, Izuku snapped back, almost defensively. Sorry. He lowered his gaze guiltily, knowing he had crossed some sort of line. Don't look at me like that, Izuku hissed, tail lashing back and forth. He rolled his eyes, a little flare of frustration fizzling out before it could even begin to burn. Fine, I used to live out here, before all the Musutafu mutilator shit. Right, sorry, forgot about all. Dabai hunched his shoulders, gesturing vaguely from Izuku's green hair to scorpion tail. Yeah, Izuku snorted. Damn old man, don't get senile on me. The two crossed into the self-sustaining city, the energy of this other world washing over them in a wave of sound and life. Oi, Midoriya. The sound was almost crowing, piercing over the constant hum of voices. Where you been? Another voice popped in, calling out as soon as they heard the name Midoriya. Haven't seen you in months, fucker. Little Midoriya coming back to our humble little home. People seem to know you, Dabai said, stating the obvious with a blandness that Izuku felt almost proud of. He still snorted, shrugging his shoulders. I don't know, maybe they're talking about you. You're a Midoriya, too, remember? Oi, Scorpion, a voice called out, deep and growly, yet still friendly. A welcoming rumble of thunder. Izuku spun around, catching sight of the voice calling to him. He waved, intense glare softening slightly when he saw the woman behind the counter, a line of meat smokers and grills behind her. He stepped towards her makeshift shop, feigning friendliness. Oh, Sasa. Sasa waved, her claws flashing in the bright lights, her fanged maw split into a bright smile. I haven't seen you in ages. You're still sleeping in the dumpster behind Banu's. No, I moved in with my father, he gestured towards Dabai. They looked almost nothing alike. Ice blue eyes in interesting juxtaposition to a single forest green, but scars and black hair to black with green were enough to sell it. Even though Sasa knew he had no family, she took it in stride. Sasa raised an eyebrow, looking Dabai over critically before nodding. He had passed some sort of inspection or approval. Oh, sure. Nice to meet you, Scorpion's father. Sasa stuck out her massive hand, shaking Dabai's own vigorously. Dabai simply looked on in shock as his hand was covered entirely by the hand of the woman behind the counter. Midoriya Dabai. Sure thing, Midoriya-san. Sasa turned around, opening one of the smokers and reaching in with a pair of tongs. Using her massive and razor-sharp claws, she sliced it into chunks before turning back around and handing each of them a piece of meat. What does this taste like to you? Cautiously, Dabai bit into the offered meat. It's familiar. Beef. Sasa's orange eyes bored into Dabai's as she nearly stopped breathing in anticipation. Nuo. Dabai thought it over, trying to dredge up memories of every meal he had eaten. Izuku kept chewing on his piece of meat, swallowing it before saying blandly, I have no taste buds. SHH, she said, leaning in closer and watching Dabai with a level gaze. Goat. Dabai racked his brain, his answer clicking into place. I think it tastes like despair. Sasa snapped her fingers in frustration. Aw, rats. Oh, that's it. Dabai exclaimed. I think it tastes like rat. Sasa threw her head back, nearly screeching with laughter. Thanks, boys. She turned back to her grill, closing it back up, talking the entire while. She grabbed a pair of tongs, opened a different grill and flipped the meat sizzling on the rack. Raising her voice, she talked over the sound of her cooking. I've been working on a vegan meat replacement, but without wheat, soy, or pea protein, trying to cut down on allergy risks. She turned back around, a plate in one of her hands. She set down the plate, grabbing a stack of pita breads from under the counter of her stall. I used to be a biochemist, you know. Dabai watched as Sasa assembled a stack of pita sandwiches. The bread quickly split and shoved full of meat and vegetables quicker than anything he had ever seen before. Really, he never would have guessed that. Yeah, but now, I just do meat. I think I like it better. No more corporate secrets, no engineering explosive squash, no making corpse-eating moss for the military. Sasa froze, quickly going back to her work, acting as if what she had just said wasn't terrifying and insane. Don't worry about moss. Moss is good for you. She muttered her next words, leaning in as if it was some secret. Just don't touch too much of it. Dabai froze, horror rising in his guts. What did that mean? Okay. What the fuck did that mean? Here, take these, go on and take it all in. Sasa pointed down the rows of stalls to the corner and the line outside of it. And if you need medical, the doctor is in. His heart still racing with fear, Dabai asked quietly, the doctor. Sharon, Izuku prompted, reminding Dabai about something his memory had been fuzzy on. After all, he had only been oxygen deprived and drugged. They got you your inhaler. Oh, right. The living statue who could tell when you would die. Nothing could make him forget that experience. Sasa leaned one elbow on the counter. So you know them, eh? They come here every weekend to help out. She sucked her teeth, her face taking on a wistful expression. Wish they could be here more. We could really use another permanent doctor. There are nearly 1,000 people that live here permanently and about 300 more that come and go. Isn't Hammerhead the permanent doctor? Izuku asked, wondering if his memory served correctly. His memory from that time was a bit fuzzy, his body fighting infections and rejection from the last procedures and the quirks that came with it. All he really remembered was a giant man with the head of a sleeper shark looming over him with an IV and a clipboard. And glasses. That he is, Sasa nodded. She remembered when Scorpion had first come to the skate park in the arms of Hammerhead. Just one of the victims of the Musutafu mutilator. Hammerhead had stitched him up, and 2 weeks later, a new skater was born. With nostalgia in her voice that was lost on Izuku, she waved Izuku goodbye. I'll see you around, Scorpion. Izuku gestured with his pita sandwich, heading down the rows of stalls, and continued to explain how everything worked in the skate park when a sound made him stop in his tracks. Midoriya Izuku. Oh no, Izuku said, quickly shoving the rest of his sandwich into his mouth. Is that a horde of children? And are they running towards us? Izuku grinned, something genuine shining through the pasted-on expression, and he bent down on one knee, catching the first of the children racing towards him. If it isn't my favorite Hellions, he said flatly, ignoring the way the children tried to climb over him. I see you didn't miss me a bit. We missed you so much, one of the kids shouted, hopping up and down. Where have you been? Yeah, Augustin, it's been so long. Isn't my quirk cool? Another little girl shouted, her hands fading and vanishing from sight before coming back in patches. I can go invisible now. Play with us, play with us. More children joined into the chant, hopping around Izuku in a circle. Another kid yelled over them, show us your tail, before more of them joined in with them, 2 different chants going on at the same time. Oh, all right. Izuku whipped his tail around before he straightened back up, the group of children around him watching him excitedly. Who wants to play chase Izuku around the skate park? That's the best game. I'm the best at it. I call pulling Augustin's tail. Well, I call lighting him on fire. Dabai backed away quickly. Oh god, those children are terrifying. Izuku just snorted, crouching down in a sprinter's start, tail lashing back and forth until he flew forward like a shot, activating the quirk in his legs with every step. Each time his foot hit the ground, he activated double jump, shooting forward another meter each step. As soon as he started, the horde of children began to chase after him, firing their quirks to aid in the chase, or just to cause chaos and noise. Was this what all children were like? His own childhood. It had been so strict. The only times he was really allowed outside were few and far between. And as for friends, he never had many due to being homeschooled. He never had the chance to socialize, not even with his own family. All of this was overwhelming, but he still liked it. The noise, the smells, the sheer presence of everything. Maybe if he had known a place like this existed, if he had taken that step with his younger siblings. No, there was no point in thinking about that. If there was one thing he had learned from Izuku, it was that the future was impossible to pin down, and the past was impossible to change, live in the present, or not at all. Dabai couldn't understand it. It was as if Izuku became an entirely different person at the skate park. His lack of emotions didn't stop him from going out of his way to be kind, spending nearly an hour letting the kids of the park chase him around and lob attacks at the back of his head. He just didn't get it. Every time he saw the change, it was like seeing a slice of an alternate reality, a reality that he couldn't begin to comprehend. But he didn't need to comprehend that reality. He watched as Izuku pulled back his foot and kicked a rock all the way across the street, the rock skipping up onto the sidewalk and clattering off into the distance. This reality was just fine. It was less than an hour since their most recent visit to the skate park, and the two were on the way back home when Izuku froze, eyes wide as he watched 3 people cross the street ahead of them. A short woman with straight black hair, a taller man with curly black hair, 2 people that set his fangs tingling and his stomach burning and boiling with incomprehensible wrath. He choked it down. A happy little family that he wasn't a part of anymore. Him, and someone new. A little girl with straight black hair and the same green eyes that he used to see in the mirror every day before he had. She couldn't be more than 3 years old, but it was obvious what she was. Izuku had been missing for nearly 4 years now. There was no doubt what this meant. The little sister he never had, his replacement, and them, people that would simply have another instead of finding the lost. Moving on with ease. He had known she existed, but to actually see Izuku. Dabai nearly ran straight into Izuku, concern flaring when he saw the expression on his son's face. Are you okay? Izuku just hissed and pushed Dabai back into an alley on the side of the street, unable to take his eyes off of them. Had they ever been so happy when they were with him? Had they ever just gone out as a family? No worries to follow them back home. He couldn't remember. Coming out to Musutafu made running into them a possibility, but he hadn't thought about it. He hadn't wanted to. Shit, he muttered, not taking his eyes off of them. He didn't want to know what they were saying, but he still found himself creeping closer, something wrenching and squirming in his chest. Whatever he was feeling burned inside him. Izuku. Izuku shook his head, pushing forward. He had to know what they were saying. Go on ahead, I'll be back later. Izuku reached into his wallet. Here, he shoved some cash into Dabai's hand. Get yourself something for dinner at Benu's. Is that never mind? Dabai already knew who those people must be. Instead, he just nodded, accepting the cash that was probably stolen or made from selling something illegal, and he left out the back of the alley. Dabai looked at his son, shadows falling over his figure like a death shroud. "See you at home, Izuku," he murmured, turning to leave. Izuku listened closer, his heart clenching in his chest. "Miho, be careful." Miho, was that the name of his little sis, his replacement? Sticking to the shadows, Izuku followed them. One visible eye narrowed as some emotion began to chill his blood. He hissed and snarled under his breath, tail lashing from side to side. "Mom, can we get Taiyaki?" "Sure, Miho." "Hisashi, Taiyaki sounds good, Inko." Izuku ground his teeth, creeping even closer, only to duck under a low bridge when they nearly ran directly into his hiding place when they turned down the street he was on. "Damn," he muttered, watching the three of them walk away, not even noticing he had been watching. And wasn't that just the perfect way for another encounter with people he used to care for? Never even being noticed. They didn't even know he was here, that he was even still alive. And they didn't care. He kicked at the wall in frustration, shifting his right arm to metal and burying it up to the wrist with the next hit. Izuku jerked his hand back, baring his fangs and hissing. A roar began to build in his chest, a boiling rage and sorrow trying to escape before it. "Ah, what do we have here?" It fizzled out. Izuku froze, a misshapen shadow falling over him. He whirled around, eyes widening at the towering lump of sludge bubbling up from the ground. Oh-ho, a medium-sized body, perfect to hide in. The green-gray glop roiled and shifted. Orange eyes and cartoonish teeth turned to watch him. "How fortunate," the voice wheedled, somehow sounding rough and greasy at the same time. No thank you." Izuku backed away, his mind flicking between which quirk would be most useful. Laser gazer would work best. But there could be so much collateral damage if he mistimes anything. As in, the entire bridge and anything or anyone on top of it obliterated collateral. Possibly himself. Scorpion. He wasn't even sure how venom would affect a massive blob of slime. Flame on would work, but only if he got close to the thing. He didn't really want to do that. Or breathe would keep him from drowning if he was attacked. But he really didn't want to go near that. Just the time it would take for the laundry afterwards alone. He would probably have to replace his phone. And he would need to get a new wallet, and he had just bought new shoes. Too much work. Maybe if he was wearing different clothes. Who was he kidding? He still wouldn't want to do that. And Dabai would probably complain if he tracked sludge in the apartment. Living indoors had ruined him. Living in a dumpster was so much more convenient in a fight. He kept backing away when a thick tendril of slime whipped towards him, and he leapt to the side, landing on the concrete and rolling back up to his feet in the blink of an eye. There was only one quirk that would let him keep his distance. One broken quirk that made something in his chest ache whenever he used it. Izuku raised his left arm, dusky purple flames springing to life on his skin. "Oh, what an interesting quirk you have." The villain grinned, its sharp spiny teeth opening wide in what Izuku assumed was supposed to be a menacing gesture. He wasn't impressed. Izuku's tail lashed back and forth as a ball of flame began to coalesce in his palm, purple transmuting to bright yellow. The ball shuddered and jumped, his control nearly slipping as it grew. His right arm shifted to metal, and he used it to brace his left arm up. Keeping moving, he kept his distance from the villain, the flame growing brighter and brighter before he split the ball into quarters that spun around his wrist. Well, Izuku placed one foot behind him, strengthening his stance. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, firing the first of 4 unstable fireballs at the next attacking coil of slime. The slime coil hissed and fizzled, boiling away and pulling back into the villain's body with a disgusting slurp sound. A blackened patch of glop settled and seemed to sag where the tendril recollected. "Oh, you're gonna get it now, you little shit." The villain rushed forward, taking another 2 shots into the center of its mass. "I'm gonna drown you and wear your body like a cheap suit." "Hugo boss." "Well, that would be upsetting if I could get upset," Izuku stated flatly, his words just agitating the villain even more as he simply stood there, collecting more flames and firing off the largest of the fireballs so far. The blazing ball shuddered and jerked through the air, its path winding and curving before it struck the villain in what he supposed was the chest area, stunning them for a moment. "Have no fear, I am here." Was that? No fucking way. Izuku jolted, his tail stiffening and the black fur raising in alarm as he was genuinely surprised for once in his life. Was that All Might? Why was All Might in Musutafu? What the hell is going on? Lowering his arms, Izuku shut down all 3 quirks, watching in awe, almost actual awe, as All Might took down the villain in one punch. Well, Izuku turned to leave. It seems like he's got this handled. He is a professional, after all. There was once a time he would have adored to be here in this place, watching All Might fight so close. But times had changed. He might not like All Might anymore. He wasn't a child after all. But he has to admit he's good at his job. Just not the one job that mattered, he thought. The little voice in the back of his head hissing and greasy with long-suppressed and dulled hatred. He ignored it. Izuku pulled his phone, checking his texts. 3 from Dabai, 1 from Uraraka. Ugh, why was Dabai so needy? He shot off a quick reply, letting his father know that he was still alive and on his way back before putting his phone back in his pocket. He glanced at the time before he put his phone away. wondering if he would have time to pick up a meal out of a dumpster on his way home. Or he could just hit 7 minutes 11. Young man. Izuku ignored the voice and kept walking, head down as his tail began coiling around his waist and up to his torso. Young man, come back. No, thank you, Izuku called back over his shoulder, trying to filter out the sound of footsteps following him. Young man. All Might was probably talking to himself at this point, but Izuku still heard him mutter, "Why are you walking away? Go away." Izuku tried to enunciate his words around his fangs, as if that was the problem with communication. He knew it wasn't. Young man. Oh my god. Izuku stopped and turned around, glaring with his one uncovered eye. What do you want? He didn't miss the way All Might stared at his eye patch and scars as if he was surprised a teenager could have some sort of injury. And whatever it was All Might was about to say was cut off by a bloody cough. Izuku froze, a flash of weak shock running through him when he saw droplets of blood run down the hero's face. Was All Might injured? Was the so-called greatest hero sick? Dying? All Might coughed again, covering his mouth with his hand, but unable to hide the blood. He kept coughing as massive clouds of steam seemed to rise from his skin, leaving behind what looked like a walking corpse. All Might? Izuku asked blandly, not missing the way the hero flinched under his gaze. Was this some sort of secret? Come to think of it, he had never seen a report about All Might having a second form. Maybe it was a transformation quirk he was passing off as an enhancement quirk. If that's what he was doing, Izuku had to admit it was pretty smart. After all, his quirk was always surrounded by mystery, so Izuku shrugged it off, forcing himself back to the present. The hero hunched down, coughing again. He looked around, making sure there was no one else around. Not so loud. Rolling his eyes, Izuku grabbed the hero by the wrist, dragging him into the shadows of the bridge. Hidden away from the possible prying eyes of anyone else on the street, he sighed. I'm probably going to regret asking you this, but are you all right? You don't seem surprised that I'm. The hero gestured to himself as if he expected this to be a surprise. Oh, I just assumed it might be a full-body transformation quirk. Izuku shrugged, scratching at his neck. Not really that rare. I know about 7 people with that kind of deal. All Might seemed to give that statement pause, thinking it over. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Goodbye, have a nice day. Izuku turned away, taking his first step. Wait, the hero called out, reaching for the strange child's shoulder to stop him. He couldn't have the secret of his injury getting out to the public. The internet would tear him apart, his career would be ruined. Izuku stopped, rolling his eyes. What? I have to get to the train or else I have to wait another hour for the next one. You won't tell anyone, will you? Don't tell anyone that All Might has a transformation quirk, Izuku said slowly, trying to figure that one out. Right. What's the big deal? I have a transformation quirk, he said, shifting his right arm to metal and back. All Might paused, quickly reconciling the quirk he was looking at versus the one he had seen. Could it be possible for this child to be one of the last remaining agents of All for One? No, he was too young. He couldn't be more than 14. And the likelihood of All for One having an 8-year-old around was just ridiculous. But he found himself speaking, even as he tried to rationalize everything. It's not a transformation quirk. You know how some people thave it? Izuku lisped, raising up a hand and cutting the hero off completely. I have never cared less about anything than I have at this moment. Oh, a flash of confusion and hurt crossed All Might's face before he schooled his expression. Never mind, then. Just don't tell anyone. Please, Izuku hissed unintentionally, flashing his fangs. Ugh, fine. You should probably go turn in that villain. Right, thank you. All Might sighed with relief. His secret would be safe. He patted his pockets, the bottles in his pockets feeling lighter for some reason. Oh, no. He pulled out one of the bottles, seeing a small puncture in the plastic. When he took out the other, he saw the cap had been screwed on at an angle. Let me guess they got away. Izuku nodded, once again remembering a time when meeting All Might would have been the highlight of his entire life. But that time was gone. Well, have fun with that. Goodbye again. Izuku turned to leave again, hands in his pockets as he walked away. This wasn't his problem. It was All Might's problem. This wasn't his problem. Hero work wasn't his business. Those explosions in the distance weren't his business. Mikumo. Those explosions. Mikumo. We'll be friends forever, right? Right, Izuku whispered, freezing in the middle of the street as explosions rang from the alley near the arcades and shopping center. Friends forever. Those explosions. His head hurt, like something had been yanked out of his head. A gaping hole where something deadly and poisoned had been. Izuku lifted his gaze from the point of nothingness he had been staring into, looking up into a crowd of people surrounding a cloud of explosions and a towering column of gray-green sludge. Izuku put one foot forward, then another. He couldn't stop himself. He didn't want to be doing this. It would be easier to leave, to go to the subway station and just go home, but he couldn't stop. He had to do this. Those explosions. He shoved his way through the crowd, pushing at least one cameraman to the ground as he moved. Then another camera went down. Another knocked out of someone's hands as he moved through the people. A familiar face was lingering to the back of the crowd. The skeletal face of All Might's secret form watching from behind everyone else. But All Might wasn't important. Those explosions. Kakin. Izuku felt his tail lash someone across the face as he lunged forwards, his left arm lighting up in dusky purple flames. His fangs were bared as he snarled and hissed as his quirks fired on instinct, double jump launching him over the rest of the crowd. He landed in front of the villain, his right hand shooting forward as he blasted ball after ball of fire into the orange eyes of the villain with his left. The fireballs were stable, perfectly round spheres as they had once been. The moment his fingers made it through the sludge and touched real human flesh, he grabbed hold, transforming his right arm to metal, unable to let go even if he wanted to. Yanking and pulling, firing on that unstoppable instinct, Izuku took a step back. The crowd screamed and cheered as the heroes had to fight to hold back the press. And a step back. He blocked out the sounds, focusing only on his goal. Each step slowly began to drag the villain's near victim free. He couldn't stop now. He had come so far, he couldn't stop. And a step back. He could hear them breathing now, deep heaving gasps for air. He couldn't stop. And a step back. The world seemed to snap back into focus. The noise of the crowd, the shouting and cheering, the sirens and crackling of fire. A final step back, and he fell back onto his ass, dragging the person who reminded him so much of his childhood friend down with him, clutched tight against his chest. He nearly had to fight his quirks down, Ironsides practically refusing to let his metal skin become ordinary flesh once again. He peeled his fingers away from the wrist of the boy he had rescued. The skin where Izuku's metal fingers had wrapped around his wrist was already an angry red. They coughed, a loud and rasping half-drowned sound that Izuku pushed away, literally and figuratively, as he shoved them off of him into the side, scrambling back to his feet, purple flames still blazing on his left arm. Looking down, he finally got a good look at whoever the villain had been attacking, and his slow-beating heart almost stopped. He had already known, but he hadn't registered it. But he would recognize that blonde hair and those red eyes anywhere. Bakugo Katsuki, Kakin, his friend. Izuku reached down, grabbing Katsuki by the collar of his uniform and dragging him backwards away from the villain, closer to the heroes and the ambulances. His forked tongue flicked out, picking up the scent of All Might, moving from the back of the crowd to the front. A quick glance confirmed that he really was here and that he was in his well-known public form. Thank fuck. It was time to leave. This wasn't his business anymore. Bakugo rasped out his words before hacking out a rough cough, small bits of slime dribbling down his face. He looked up, catching a glimpse of messy green hair and a single green eye that looked so similar to the ones that haunted his nightmares. His body was racked with spasms, and his lungs still struggled for air as paramedics surrounded him. When he looked back up, the stranger was gone. Ducking away from the scene, Izuku darted away, leaving the sounds of the fight in the background as he scampered down alleyways he had been running though since he was a child. The garbage and filth were different, but the city was the same. His lungs nearly heaved in his chest, her breath going into overdrive to keep his breathing steady even as his heart began to pound against his ribs. He ran full kilter, a flash of frustration running through him. His face, had he been caught on camera, he had knocked a bunch of them down on his way in, and he had kept his back to the crowd, but maybe he had still been seen. He turned a sharp corner, skidding to a halt, his breathing finally getting heavy as he came to a stop. His muscles burned. Well, almost half of them did, unused to this exercise. Reaching into his pocket, he fumbled for his pack of cigarettes, lighting one with a wisp of purple flame, his hands shaking with adrenaline he hadn't felt since the days of the warehouse. And he lifted the cigarette to his lips, exhaling a cloud of nicotine. Izuku slumped against the wall, his forked tongue flicking through the haze, picking up the nicotine and another scent. Ah, hell, he mumbled around the cigarette, words completely unable to be understood, even by himself. That scent was All Might. Was he following him? Why would he do that? Whatever that's all about, he has no idea. And no interest. Young man, I thought I said it earlier. Izuku glared with his uncovered eye. The adrenaline in his system was giving him the shakes. Go away. That was before you saved someone's life. All Might coughed up blood, and smoke began to rise from his skin once more. Do you mind if I? He made vague motions with his hands, something that Izuku assumed was him trying to convey his transformation. Izuku gestured with his lit cigarette. Go on with it. He exhaled another cloud of smoke, aiming away from All Might. It probably wouldn't be right to blow smoke in the face of someone who was coughing up blood. He closed his eyes, the back of his head hitting the wall, his hair tangling and catching on the exposed brick. All Might frowned slightly. Aren't you a little young to be smoking? Izuku hissed. Fuck off. He inhaled deeply, blowing the smoke out through his bared fangs. You're not my dad. All Might looked taken aback, shocked by the brazen and bold attitude of the teen. My apologies. Izuku just shrugged, taking a few more drags off his cigarette. A quiet cough caught his attention. Have I seen you somewhere? Yeah, the other side of the precept less than an hour ago, Izuku grumbled, trying to channel Dabai's level of emotion. He thinks it's sarcasm that he's currently using. He likes it. Your face. Izuku opened his uncovered eye, grinning lopsidedly. Pretty messed up, right? He had an idea what All Might was thinking. A hero would recognize a face known from missing posters and moments of silence. At least, a hero should. He had to derail that. Insults and confusion would do the trick. That's not what never mind. All Might shook his head, trying to make sense of whatever had happened. You ran away so fast last time. And again, this time. I didn't have the chance to ask you anything. Ask away. I've got an hour because there is no way in hell I'm making my train now. What's your name? Midoriya. There was no point in skating around it. Skate. Don't tell me Yorth, he lisped. He didn't want to know. It wasn't any of his business. Why did you fight that villain? Instinct, he lied. Something about Izuku's answer was good. Judging by the expression on the hero's face, All Might put up a hand, trying to keep Midoriya from walking away again. It seemed the kid really liked walking away in the middle of other people's sentences. I wanted to make you an offer. The base of Izuku's tail tingled in warning. Some remaining animal instinct from its original owner. An offer. No thanks. Those words always mean bad things. A warehouse filled with the heaviness of death and the stench of rot. I'll make you an offer. You want to be a hero, right? You can save all these people if you let me cut you first. Won't you be my hero? Screw not fucking with people's health. Izuku blew a smoke cloud straight into All Might's face. No, All Might waved the smoke away, coughing slightly. But you could be a hero. No fucking way. Izuku was putting his foot down. There was no fucking way he was going to be spending time around All Might more than necessary. He couldn't be a hero. Let's be heroes, Mikumo. Never, Izuku hissed at the words that echoed in the back of his mind, tail lashing back and forth behind him. You don't fucking know me. Don't try and give me advice. But your quirks aren't everything. And this was the end of the necessary time. Izuku stepped away from the wall, his fists clenched to the point where his cigarette bent at a nearly 90-degree angle. Now, I'm sure you're not used to people not fainting in your presence. But I'm going home. Hold on, he waved, wondering if it was possible to be sarcastic with a single hand. Have a nice day. Izuku snarled, tail lashing as he stalked away. Or not, I really don't care. Once upon a time, he had wanted to be a hero. Not anymore. Not since the heroes who were supposed to save him, supposed to save all of them, had let them down. Not since All Might had let them down. Wait, All Might called out as Izuku ignored him. You could be an amazing hero. Izuku ignored the calls for him to stop. Memories of the past kicked up with each step he took. All Might was supposed to save them. He had been put on the Musutafu mutilator case, and he failed. He never found them. And by the time anyone found anything, it was too late. Nizoki was nothing but a splatter on the pavement, and the rest of them, succumbing to infection and organ rejection, trapped in chains and cages, unable to even help themselves. He was the only one who made it, and that was only because of skaters. Not even the skaters. It was all Hammerhead. Hammerhead had come for them. He had been too late, but he had still come for them. His cigarette was long burned out by the time he reached the train station. But the embers seemed to have made a home in his chest. Things he had been repressing for years were flaring up and fading back down just to flare up again. It was like all the small tiny pieces had finally snapped into place, and it was just so much. He all but slammed himself down into his train seat, lighting up another cigarette and glaring at the few others in the train car until they moved to the other end. Whatever he was feeling right now, and he was certainly feeling something, had him wanting to snarl at the world and gnash his teeth. Something All Might had said was sticking with him. You could be an amazing hero. Why was that sticking with him? Was it because of that dream that died so long ago? He needed to talk this out, sort things out outside of his head. Dabai would probably know what to do. Dabai was a different breed of jerk than he was, and when you put the two of them together, they formed one fucking capable asshole. One of them had motivation, the other had everything else. Izuku didn't even notice when his cigarette burnt out in his fingers. His eyes closed as he tried to sort out everything that had happened that day, trying to figure out where it all broke down. Skate park. Them. Villain. All Might. Villain. Kaken. All Might. Train. Apartment. Futon. Telling the entire thing to Dabai like it was no big deal was more natural than he thought it would be. Dabai didn't ask stupid questions, didn't act like it was the end of the world. He just listened, like a father was supposed to. Wait. Dabai sat up on his own futon halfway through the story, leaning forward so he could rest his elbows on the coffee table. So, you met All Might twice, in one day. Wasn't that just astounding? Dabai had to admit he was a bit excited. His son had met All Might twice. Izuku nodded, still trying to process everything. He leaned back on his elbows, staring up at the ceiling. Yeah, Dabai rested his chin in his hand, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. And he told you that you could be a hero. Twice, apparently. All Might wanted to make me an offer. Izuku sat up, slumping his shoulders before shrugging. I could have made him an offer. He snorted. Could have sold him some drugs. I waved that away. Putting aside whatever that first thing means, would being a hero really be so bad? If All Might had told him he could be a hero when he was still Tauya, maybe things would have been different. Yes, no, I don't fucking know. Izuku threw up his hands in what he knew must be frustration. What would be wrong with it? He asked, mostly to himself. He tried to rationalize it. It would be wrong because I have no interest in it. Izuku took a long, slow breath, thinking about where he had been just a few months ago. He was happy now. Nothing was different. He shrugged. I'd rather just get a job at Benus and live out an average, boring life until I die at 50. Live as anonymous as he could until he dies. Probably from being murdered, if he's honest with himself. Stabbed 20 times in a back alley during a drug deal gone wrong from not working with Black Box after the broker decides he's tired of working with an emotionless freakin'. Perfectly normal. You should at least go to the best school, even if you don't want to be a hero. Dabai leaned back on his own futon, a conniving glint in his eyes. Maybe he could convince his kid to at least get back into school. And if he decided to get into hero work in the process, that was just a plus. Izuku narrowed his eyes. I know you're just trying to convince me to be a UA hero student, but no thanks. He snorted, not even trying to imagine himself as a hero. He snapped his fingers, a crooked smile exposing his fangs. Tell you what, you come up with a good enough argument, I'll consider going to UA. Dabai snorted, I'll hold you to that. He would start looking into different ethical approaches first thing in the morning. Izuku had a streak of kindness and caring in his heart that even his suppressed emotions couldn't hide. Ugh, I know you will, Izuku sighed, lying down and closing his eyes. You know I hate people with motivation. Hello, is this the Akatani residence? Yes, who is this? I'm Detective Tsukachi, I'm calling too. Has there been a break in the case? Did you find who killed our son? I'm sorry, but there haven't been any fresh leads, but we're doing all that we can. Oh, all right. Thank you for keeping us informed. Have a nice night, Detective. Hello, Akatani-san. This is Detective Tsukachi. I'm calling to update you on the progress of your son's case. There hasn't been any, has there? Look, I'm sure you're trying, but we can't keep doing this. The man who killed our son is no closer to being caught than he was last month. I'm sore. Don't call us again. Hello, Akatani household. This is Detective Tsukachi. We told you not to call anymore. My family is just trying to move on. Our son is dead. Unless you can change that, don't call us again. This is Detective Tsukachi. This is Detective Tsu. This is Detective. Officer Tamakawa set down one of the 2 coffee mugs he was carrying, watching the detective hang up the phone once again. Why does he do this, he thought, with a critical look in his yellow eyes, sitting himself down beside the desk. He finally asked something he had wanted to ask for months now. Why the hell do you keep trying? Naomasa sighed, slumping back in his seat, exhaustion and desperation radiating off his frame. Because I can't be the only one who believes that this case can be solved. That case is years old. Tamakawa couldn't believe how tightly the detective clung to the cold case. No matter what new case crossed his desk, he still held tight. What's so special about it? Because even though I didn't come close to solving it, but it's still the case that made me a detective. He remembered every aspect of that case. The long nights poring through clues and data points. He had just been a junior detective before that, working with his supervisor and tracking Trigger when the first corpses had begun to show up. But they had been few and far between, at least in the beginning. And even then, they could still be ignored in the face of Trigger. It wasn't until after he stopped trying to chase vigilantes that the connections began to be made. Missing organs that would show up in the next corpse, partially healed surgical scars. At least the bodies of those who died in the Trigger case could be found in one piece. Their families and loved ones could have closure. That doesn't happen much. Tamakawa's whiskers flattened against his face, a little confused. Don't you have to solve a big case to be promoted? It's because of how many other cases were connected. The piles of corpses in warehouses, organs removed and found later halfway across the city, stolen lab equipment, a rash of break-ins, and this once missing persons case that turned into a nationwide manhunt for a mass murderer. Naomasa sighed, rubbing at his eyes in an attempt to clear them from the haze of memories. Over 30 people were killed by one man, and we never found him. He shrugged, resigned to the reality of the cold case. The feds are still working it, but they've all but given up. I won't give up on this kid. And sure, even the heroes couldn't solve this one. Naomasa said quietly, but why shouldn't I at least try? Tamakawa flicked his ears forward as Tsukachi raised a thick folder, dropping it back onto his desktop with a sigh. This is all I have left after the feds came through, but almost everything else is on a flash drive. Do you still have it? Tamakawa asked, knowing the phrase that should have kept him from asking questions ever. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Yeah, but don't watch the videos unless you're prepared to be sick for the rest of your life. What do you mean? Sansa's ears flicked forward, his interest peaked. Pieces of people were found, and the man who killed them was a doctor. You do the math. bodies spliced together, medical records showing the twisted things had lived for hours, even days before their deaths. Oh, his mind supplied the possibilities with far too much ease. He had been an officer for only 8 years, but he had seen enough of the filthy underbelly of the world to fill in the gaps. The fur on the back of Tamakawa's neck raised, instinct telling him just how wrong this was. He couldn't remember why he had come in here. All he wanted was to run and run until he forgot what he had been told. What did I come in here for? Right, the captain wants an update on your investigation into venom. Tsukachi froze. Really? Are you fucking kidding me? No, what the hell does he want me to do? Pull the evidence out of nowhere? There's nothing. Naomasa opened the file on venom before turning to the corkboard behind him. There was a quartet of mugshots pinned to it, 2 info brokers and 2 villains, 3 of them loosely connected to the drug, and one of them the only known seller. There's no pattern to the sales, just those few samples of the drug itself, and all of the labs came back with different data on each one, a few accounts of people buying it, no info on the manufacturer, and only 3 fingerprints were ever found. They couldn't even tell how the drug was made. They had nothing of value. Oh, speaking of fingerprints, the lab came back with the data on the prints. Tamakawa held out the folder he was carrying under his arm. 2 of them were identified. The other one was too smudged to be identified. Of course it was. That's just our luck, Tsukachi muttered as he took the folder, flicking through the pages. This can't be right, he muttered. We're reading the pages. This is impossible. What do you mean, sir? 2 of these 3 people are dead. How can you be sure? Naomasa slowly turned the pages of the file, missing pieces beginning to slot together. Because I'm the one who found what was left of their bodies. He closed his eyes, brought back to the stench of corpses and crude surgical equipment covered in clotted blood. The first complete laboratory found, but far from the first bodies. Aizen Iwasaki, heir to the Iwasaki Technology Foundation. Riku Koyama, grandson of the retired hero Iron Hand. He snapped the folder shut. Both of them were killed by the Musutafu mutilator. He frowned, feeling like he was missing something. Oh, how could he have missed it? It was so obvious. They're connected. By God, they're connected. Tsukachi dropped the file, reeling with the sudden understanding. He had connected the dots without even knowing there had been dots. The last 2, almost 3 now, years of failure, dead ends, and false starts had finally given him something. A single point of data, a solitary clue. He had a lead. Iwasaki was missing his left hand, and Koyama was missing his right. Bodies spliced together. Could one of those twisted things have survived? Gone on to live a life in the shadows. Shady dealing from a corrupted life wasn't too far beyond the norm. What's connected? Tamakawa stood up, looking at the 2 open files, immediately looking away again when he saw images of half-rotted remains strewn across a blood-soaked warehouse. He hadn't needed to see that. The Musutafu mutilator killings and venom. Tsukachi opened the file back up, looking between the 2 of them and the corkboard behind him. Now, we just need to figure out how. Tamakawa took a step back, only for desperate hands to grab the collar of his uniform. With a sudden display of surprising strength, Tsukachi dragged the officer forward until he was nearly nose to nose with the man. Leaning over his desk, the detective was breathing erratically, eyes wide and wild. Panic radiated off of him, a nearly physical thing. You cannot tell the captain about this, do you understand? I cannot get taken off this case again, I can't. He let go with one hand, running his hand through his hair, messing it up more than it had already been. The feds will just sweep in and take the venom case with them. Detective. Tsukachi grabbed the officer's shoulder, shaking the cat-headed man. Promise me. Oh, okay. With those words he was free, the detective nodding once in appreciation before sighing heavily and placing both hands flat on his cluttered desk. As soon as he was released, Tamakawa took a massive step back, slowly exiting the room as Tsukachi mutters to himself, turning to a large corkboard in the rear of his office, flipping it around to reveal a mass of strings and scraps of paper. Tamakawa left, not wanting to see any more. He made up his mind as he closed the door behind him. He wouldn't tell the captain. He pretended that what he had just seen hadn't rattled him to his core. It's been dark in the office for a few hours now when a familiar knock comes at the door. Come in, Naomasa called out, not looking away from his case files from Venom and the Musutafu mutilator. So much connection. Well, one point of connection that everything hinges upon. Hey, Itashinori took a step into the office of his friend, stopping and looking around. Wow, it's dark in here, he said quietly. There was a haze of cigarette smoke and the stench of coffee in the air. Takeout containers were thrown near the empty trash can. It was something out of a stereotypical detective noir novel. All it needed was half-open blinds with yellow streetlight streaming through to complete the image. Yeah. Naomasa picked up his freshest cup of coffee, not flinching at the bitter flavor that was only strengthened by the cold. He picked up a black pin, stabbing it into a map of Yokohama. Another corpse found with partially healed surgical scars. Just another one for the count. Now that he knew the exact parameters of what he was looking for, more reports of bodies had cropped up, appearing in every ward except Camino. He picked up a pencil and scribbled furiously on the notepad, knowing just how suspicious it was that corpses would show up everywhere except one area. After all, nobody wants to drop a body in their own neighborhood. Naomasa flipped through the pages of reports on the corpses, frowning deeply at what he read. Nearly all of the victims had gone missing from Jaku and the surrounding areas. Looks like he would need to order an investigation into Jaku General Hospital. No, wait, damn it, he can't order an investigation. Not unless he wants to just hand this case over to whatever federal investigator would get assigned to it. He would have to do this one on his own. Are you all right? Toshinori asked, sitting down in the chair in front of the detective's desk. Naomasa waved away Toshinori's concern. I'm fine, just a bad case coming back to haunt me. He didn't want to admit to his own past failings. Now he knew better, knew of the things he would have done differently. But each new body found was like a tolling of a bell, signaling the world of his personal failings. Oh, then is this a bad time? Toshinori moved to stand, more than willing to leave his friend to his work if he was asked. Nothing's going to be a good time after this, not for the cops or the heroes. He took another gulp of coffee before picking up a yellow pin. He stabbed this one into a map of Hasu with even more aggression this time. Another venom arrest, another personal failure. We're all fucked, he said far too calmly, resigned to the concept of the Musutafu mutilator once again at large. Drugs and violence were somehow connected in a way he could do nothing about. Above the map of Hasu was a wanted poster of a moderately well-known info broker, held up by two yellow pins. Black Box, Aka, the only known seller of venom. Above the map of Yokohama was Black Box's rival, Jurin. He had been the original seller of venom, but if rumors were to be believed, he had had a falling out with the manufacturer. At this point, Naomasa was more than willing to believe those rumors. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was desperation. He needed something he could cling to in this case. He had moved the other two wanted posters. The two villains hadn't been active for so long it was obvious there wasn't a connection to either case. Hammerhead was one of the greatest villains that Japan had ever seen and would probably ever see again. And honestly, so was Twice, but neither was the sort to get involved with drugs or murder. Just robbery and more robbery or, in Hammerhead's case, taking over Kyoto for 8 days with an army of spider bots. The federal government played down the time, the same way they played down the exploits of Twice or the string of murders by the Musutafu mutilator. Thus the nearly identical sticky notes taped on almost every flat surface. Don't trust the federals. Well, then, Toshinori looked over the desk, noticing for the first time just how haggard his friend looked. It's obvious he's been awake for a while now. Is there anything I can help out with? Naomasa sighed, slumping down in his seat. I don't think I'm the right person for any of this. Come on, you're a great detective. Detective, Naomasa scoffed, shaking his head. That's a real bad joke. I can't even find one murderer, but I can find the corpses. He snorted, picking up a half-burned-out cigarette from the ashtray on his desk. Picking up a lighter, he relit it, rubbing at his temple with his free hand. He was trying to quit smoking, but it looks like that was just another thing he couldn't beat. Then the feds sweep in, and they throw me a promotion to keep me quiet, he sneered, remembering the smug look on the faces of the officials that had taken his files all those years ago, leaving him with nothing but the fallout. Toshinori frowned, surprised at the sudden shift from nearly manic with the researching and pins to melancholy. Are you drunk? He asked, trying to come up with a rational explanation for his behavior. He had never seen his friend so paranoid looking. Shaking his head, Naomasa drew his eyebrows together in confusion. He stubbed out the remaining quarter of his cigarette, forcing himself to focus once again. No, what? Why would he just shook it off, gesturing to the corkboard covered in information behind him. I've been up all night connecting the dots. Toshinori knew he would regret asking this, but he had to know. What dots? I can't talk to you about an active case that heroes aren't involved in, you know that. Naomasa waved away the question, almost dismissively before going back to the remaining stack of paperwork. 10 straight hours had condensed everything into something easily connected and drawn together. All of this from a theory, taken from the hands of dead men. Sorry. Toshinori debated just leaving his friend to spiral into madness. He shifted awkwardly in his seat. Naomasa looked away from all his files, actually seeing his friend for the first time since he had walked into his office. His eye twitched. The detective leaned forward in his seat, watching his friend with far too focused energy. I'm being so rude right now, aren't I? How are you doing, Yagi-san? Oh, I'm doing well, the way I'm always doing. So, not great, huh? The detective shrugged, still staring intensely. Well, Toshinori rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly, looking away into the floor. He wasn't counting, but he's fairly certain that Tsukachi hadn't blinked once since he had come into his office. It was unnerving. Have you been eating properly? You ran out of time yesterday, too, didn't you? Naomasa shook his head. You should be more careful. Toshinori just looked away, cheeks flushing under his friend's level stare. TFH, like I'm anyone to judge you. Naomasa gestured to himself, having picked up a new cigarette sometime during his staring session. I swore I'd quit smoking, but here I am. I feel like I should be asking you how you're doing, Toshinori admitted. This case seems to be messing with you. This fucking case, Naomasa muttered, angrily stubbing out his new cigarette. This fucking case, he repeated, fists clenching. His eye twitched again. What the hell had happened in this case? Toshinori couldn't help but wonder. But he stayed quiet, letting his friend work through his struggle. I'm just frustrated because the Musutafu mutilator is still out there, and I can't do a damn thing to stop him. Naomasa slammed his clenched fist onto the stack of files, struggling to keep himself from shaking. 30. There have been 30 murders since his hideout was raided 4 years ago. They match his MO. Exactly. And nobody's willing to open the case back up. The Musutafu mutilator. Toshinori frowned. That name was familiar somehow. Biggest case this precinct has seen in 30-something years. Even bigger than Trigger, and he had been stuck working on them both. And they just swept it all under the rug. Naomasa shook his head, leaning back in his seat and fuming quietly. Makes me question what the hell I'm even doing, you know. Toshinori didn't like where this conversation was headed. But he couldn't say that he had never felt the same way before. Leaning forward, the hero saw a flash of color that caught his eye. He looked down, surprised to see a picture of a tattooed arm on the desk. I've seen that tattoo before. It was fresh in his mind. The boy who wore that tattoo flicking between absolute apathy to wrath in an instant. Rude and unapologetic. Utterly unique. What was his name? Midoriya. Had some kind of mixed quirk. He rambled on for a bit. At first I thought it was multiple quirks, maybe a minion of All for One, but that would be impossible. Any remaining servants of his would be much older. That and he wasn't scared of me like he would have been if he was. What was I saying? The hero got himself back on track. Oh, right. He was quite the delinquent. As soon as Toshinori had begun to speak, the detective froze, his heart beating wildly. This was it. This was the break he had been looking for. What kind of a quirk? He asked, voice shaking. Purple fire, metal arm, and a tail. Purple fire, Aizen Iwasaki. Metal arm, Riku Koyama. Tail, maybe Shinobu Kenoshita, or Iro Nakayama. The two victims both had tails as part of their quirks, and neither of them were found. Naomasa forced himself to keep his voice level, not looking away from the hero across his desk. And where were you when you saw him? Oh, it was Musutafu. Musutafu. Of course it was Musutafu. Naomasa dropped into his chair with a rush of exhausted exhaled breath. So, I was right, he murmured. I was right. He dragged his hands over his face, rubbing at his tired eyes. Why the hell did I have to be right? He sighed, picking up his phone. I have to make a call. It's 6 a.m. Who makes calls this early? I know. Naomasa unlocked his phone, the light from the screen nearly blinding him in the darkness of his office. His eyes quickly adjusted. He'll be awake. Who? The only one who takes my calls anymore, he said bitterly while he dialed in a number he'd been putting in weekly for the last 4 years. The only one aside from himself who seemed to still care about this case. Just as he was about to make the call, he paused. Oh, got it. He tossed his phone back onto his desk. What is it? Naomasa rubbed at his temples with both hands, trying to force his brain to process anything other than the overwhelming mania he'd been riding for the last 8 hours. The only person who takes my calls about the Musutafu mutilator was attacked by a villain earlier today. He's still in the hospital until tomorrow. Was he having a breakdown? Oh, that's unfortunate. Toshinori stayed quiet, thinking over the villains he had heard about the day before. He listened as Tsukachi continued talking to himself, rambling thoughts that he seemed to be trying to quantify and organize. It really is. Naomasa shrugged, wondering if the hospital would allow him to visit. Shouldn't be talking anyway. He nearly drowned after all. They could communicate with writing, maybe. His best friend was one of the original victims, and I've been keeping him updated. He should know that there are new leads. He shook his head, remembering what had driven him to keep in contact with the kid. You know, he told me something when I asked why he still cared when Akatani's parents didn't. What was that? He said, you never stop missing the ones you love. And that just stuck with me. He had to wonder, why had everyone else given up so easily? Why was he the only one that seemed to want to solve this? Why did it have to be him? Why couldn't it have been a hero? Did you know I speak German? I don't care, Dabai said bluntly, closing the cash register and shoving the customer's change at them. He had bigger and worse things to think about. His most recent doctor's visit, for one, apparently. He was running at 36 degrees when he used to run at 31, one of the few things he remembered from doctor's visits as a kid. The way Charon described it was that his brain is fucking fried from a 7-year fever. Just another example of his damn quirk trying to kill him. Could he blame his father, that bastard, for it? Well, even if he couldn't, he's gonna try his best. Aw, come on, Midoriya-san. Tabata leaned back against the cigarette and chewing tobacco case. He lightly stomped one foot, acting as if not having attention was killing him. You're supposed to tell me something interesting about you now. No, the customer at the counter snorted, taking his bag and leaving. Anyone who came into 7-11 at 5 am knew just how it worked there. The two graveyard shift workers became more enthusiastic, or in Dabai's case, more irritated, the closer it got to 6 am and clocking out. I'm not interesting, Dabai said with absolute honesty. At least, he didn't think he was interesting. Tabata rolled his eyes, not believing that for a single second. He watched his superior pick up a bottle of spray sanitizer, spraying off the countertops and wiping them down. What? Dabai paused, looking up and watching Denjiro immediately start looking anywhere other than him. What do you want? He said flatly, going back to his mindless cleaning. I'm just curious. About you, you're so mysterious. Dabai just stared blankly ahead, deciding not to comment on that. He would take a page out of Izuku's book and not let anyone know what he was thinking unless it benefits him. In this case, anyone was an annoying coworker who obviously wanted to be friends. He didn't have a problem with Denjiro. After all, they've been working together for over a month, but he just still thinks he's annoying. Loud, overly dramatic. But he grows on you like a flesh-eating fungus. Fine, maybe the flesh-eating aspect was just exaggeration, but Denjiro was still a fungus. Go clean something, he said finally instead of the many other things he wanted to say, most of them crude and insulting. Dabai picked up the broom, tossing it across the room with ease. Tabata shrieked, ducking away from the lightly tossed broom. Why? Because cleaning is important. That's not what. Dabai narrowed his eyes, glaring and giving off an aura of danger. Tabata held in his hands defensively, all but scampering down the closest aisle. Never mind. I hate you so much, Dabai hissed through gritted teeth. What? Tabata nearly dropped his broom, standing on tiptoe and peering over the aisle shelving. Why? Dabai rolled his eyes. Even he was trying to figure out precisely what he meant. Ugh, I don't hate you. I just hate you. I don't get it. Dabai struggled to piece together the thoughts that were currently scurrying away from his mind's reach. I'm just frustrated. I'm not good at he gestured vaguely to himself. Not good at socializing. And then you're all this. Well, those are certainly words. Dabai just clenched his fists, the damp rag in his hand sizzling and sparking from the heat he was putting off. Just get back to work, he finished weakly, turning around and going back to his cleaning. No problem, boss, Tabata mock saluted, taking his broom back in hand and continuing to sweep. We'll pick this up later. No, we won't. Yes, we will. No, Dabai reiterated, immediately realizing just how much he had picked up from his kid. We really won't. He ducked down under the counter, determined to catch that spider under there finally. It was like it was mocking him. Tabata just smiled to himself, sweeping the floor while he hummed. He continued to clean, finishing up by the time the third customer had come and gone. A few more people straggled in, clearly residents of no man's land by the way they ignored everyone, but seemed to know each other already, avoiding even coming close to each other's personal space. He nabbed a small carton of chocolate milk from the cold case, snagging a can of whipped cream as well. If he was going to have coffee on shift, he was having a mocha. Continuing with his shopping, he stopped by the fresh donuts, taking a to-go box and scraping the loose sprinkles into it. A little of this, and a little of that, and some of this whipped cream for me. Tabata all but pranced back around the counter, his mood soaring. He poured the chocolate milk first before adding the coffee. Dabai looked up from his nearly finished cleaning, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. What are you doing? Whipped cream and sprinkles. Tabata added the aforementioned whipped cream and sprinkles before picking up a second cup, waving it at Dabai. Do you want one? Flatly, Dabai answered with the first words that came to him. No, I don't need more health problems. Setting down the extra cup, Tabata crossed his arms over his chest. What's that supposed to mean? I mean that thing. Dabai pointed with subdued horror at the nearly overflowing cup. Looks like a double dose of diabetes. Rude. Tabata just rolled his eyes and took a sip of his creation, ignoring the look of disgust on his coworker's face. And now you have whipped cream in your mustache. You have whipped cream in your mustache, Tabata parroted. Dabai looked confused, his eyebrows furrowed together. I don't have a mustache. Tabata lifted the can of whipped cream, shooting it into Dabai's face. You do now, he said smugly, taking another sip of his sugary mocha. Dabai froze, staring incredulously at the sheer gall of this man. He slowly turned around and walked to the sink, wetting a paper towel and wiping away the whipped cream. When he came back, the only thing he said was, "That's coming out of your paycheck." Oh, come on. Don't be such a hard ass. Tabata rolled his eyes again, tempted to just chuck the whipped cream at his coworker's head. The customer at the counter snorted, trying to hide their laugh in their hand. Yeah, Midoriya-san, don't be a hard ass. Shut up, Dabai barked out, yelling directly in the customer's face even as he finished the transaction. The customer just kept laughing as they left. As soon as they left, he turned back to Denjiro. If I'm not a hard ass, nothing will get done around here. He wanted to be shift supervisor in a few months, so he had to try to make it. All right, you've got a point there. Tabata shrugged, letting the issue go for now. He just didn't understand why Midoriya-san had to act like a hard ass all the time. I'm gonna go take my 15, he said, picking up his coffee. He paused, making a second cup and leaving it behind next to his future boss clipboard and keys. When he came back from his break in 15 minutes, the cup was empty. Tabata picked up the cup, dropping it into the garbage. He leaned against the tobacco case, hands in his pockets as he watched his coworker pretend not to notice him staring. The door swooshed open, and a hooded figure stood there in the open doorway. There was a knife in one of their hands. It seemed to flicker and glow until they raised it, pointing it at Dabai and Tabata. In their other hand, they held a bag. Give me all the money in the register. Dabai frowned and raised his eyebrow. No, he's dealt with far worse than a stabbing. He can handle this. Dude, what? Tabata had all but leaped to his coworker's side, unsure of what to do. He had gone to a hero high school. He hadn't graduated, but he had been trained. But all of that training had fled as soon as he had seen the knife. How could Midoriya Dabai, a regular 7-11 employee, just act so nonchalant in the face of this? Give me the fucking money or I'll... The robber raised the knife and stepped further into the store, pointing the knife directly at Dabai now. I'll fucking do it. I won't hesitate. Dabai just leaned forward, staring down the robber unblinkingly. He slammed his hands onto the counter, not missing the way the robber flinched. Do it, you little bitch, he snapped, flames crackling to life along his fingertips. The robber took a step back before steeling himself and stepping 2 forward. Put the money in the bag. Dabai lifted a hand, the flames blazing higher. I'll kill us all, don't think I won't. Points the flame through the door to the gas pumps outside. Tabata had lifted his hands up in the air, but he knew he could still back up his coworker. Lowering his hands, he instead raised his voice. He'll do it, he's crazy. He tried to keep the fear from his voice, the terror and tremors from his hands. He had never been this close to his own possible death before. From the back of the store, a voice chimed in. A remaining customer shouted out, yeah, Midoriya is nuts. Shut up. Dabai all but shouted, hating how his voice made him remember worse times. He glared at the attempted robber. Now get the hell out. No, give me the money. You asked for it. Dabai gritted his teeth, letting blue flames billow from his palm, lobbing a bolt of fire at the window, purposefully falling short, but still blackening the glass with the radiating heat. The would-be robber screeched, falling back in his hurry to flee, tumbling out the door and not looking back as he ran. Smoke was still rising from Dabai's skin when he finally snapped back into focus. His quirk. He had used it on purpose after so many years. His hands were shaking, every muscle screaming run away, as he trembled where he stood. Midoriya-san. Dabai grabbed at his pocket, fumbling as he pulled out his inhaler, the continued shaking of his hands sending it clattering to the floor. Shit, he wheezed, his lungs beginning to constrict in his panic. Dabai dropped down into a squat, picking up his inhaler just to drop it again. Fuck, are you okay? Don't touch me, Dabai snapped, jerking his arm out of reach, falling back onto the floor as he did. All right, I won't. Tabata kept his voice calm, picking up his coworker's inhaler and holding it out. Here, Dabai glared, unaware of the fear in his eyes as he snatched the inhaler to himself, uncapping it and taking a puff. He slowly exhaled, repeating the ritual again to stop the wheezing and rattling in his chest. Are you? I'm fine. He panted, trying to catch his breath unsuccessfully. Just give me a minute. Dabai held his head in his hands, breathing slowly, ignoring the heat in his palms. Thanks. He closed his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. He shook his inhaler in Denjiro's direction. Oh, you're welcome. What kind of person wouldn't give someone their inhaler if they dropped it? Do you need anything? Dabai just shook his head. I hate this fucking quirk. He waved away any possible concern. I just never mind. You don't want to know. Why would? I said never mind. Okay. Dabai interrupted, quickly standing up, one hand clinging to the countertop in an effort to steady himself. Don't worry about me. I can handle myself. Do you need an ice pack? What? An ice pack? Ice in a bag. I know what a fucking ice pack is, I was asking. He trailed off, looking back up and scanning Denjiro intently. Nobody does anything for free. Everyone wants something. What did he want from him? You look like you were overheating. Unsure of why his coworker seemed so defensive, he almost stuttered over his words, confused enough to trip himself up. I just wanted to help out a little bit. Dabai narrowed his eyes. Why? What do you want from me? Nothing. Surprised and shocked at the question, Tabata held out his hands, palms up and open. You're the first friend I've had in a while. We're not friends. Tabata's face fell, disappointment written across his features. But I will take that ice pack. All right. The other man all but sprinted to the freezer section, digging in the back to find an ice pack. As he came back, he grabbed one of the boring single-colored bandanas and wrapped it around the frozen bag. Carefully he handed it over, barely stopping himself from flinching back when his fingertips brushed Damai's hand. He was almost scorching to the touch. Damai had to keep himself from snatching the ice pack out of Denjiro's hands, and he carefully held the frozen bag of ice over his chest, trying to lower his core temperature. As much as he would like to keep it on his feverish forehead or sweating neck, he had to stabilize his core the best he could. After a few minutes, what felt like an instant to Damai, the ice pack had melted back to blue slush in a plastic bag. But at least he wasn't running at 39 degrees anymore. Thanks, he mumbled quietly, staggering back into the freezer section and opening the door to the back. He stood in the stock area for a moment, his skin steaming in the blast-chilled air. He kept one hand on the freezer wall, taking a breath of chilled air and exhaling a cloud of steam. One of the freezer doors opened and Denjiro peered in between the frozen food and things. "You good in there?" Yeah, I'm alright." Damai sighed, his skin that wasn't scarred beginning to chill. He looked over to where Denjiro stood on the opposite side of the products. You know what? He might as well do his best to relax after this, and it's been a long time since he's spent any time with someone his own age. Grab a couple 6-packs, we're drinking at my place tonight. I'll chalk it up as an inventory error, he added, mostly to himself. Screw it, they deserved a reward for this bullshit. Alright, sounds great. While Denjiro headed off to the refrigerator section a few doors away, Damai pulled out his phone, sending a quick text. Dab man, bringing a friend over in an hour, get chairs. Venom boy, how many legs do they need? And VM, I'll get a few different kinds. Dab man, we only need 2. There was no reply after that. Damai sighed, leaning against the freezer wall, a small smile tugging on his staples as the cold sunk into his muscle. He knew that his son had no idea what had just happened, but this cluelessness about socializing took the edge off. His heart was still pounding in his chest, but a little slower. Things were going to be all right. No matter how much Jiren sucks, Izuku has to admit he had decent taste in apartments. However, his taste in shatterproof glass for windows, not so great with how easily Izuku punched it into pieces. As soon as he had gotten the text from his old man requesting chairs, Izuku had known exactly where to go. Jiren could move anywhere in Japan he wanted, and Izuku would always find him. All he had to say was rumor has it Jiren has a new place, and he would get some sort of answer. After all, secrets are meant to be kept, and rumors are meant to be spread. Izuku hauled himself through the broken window, landing on his feet once inside. He looked around, taking it all in. Now that he was inside, he changed his mind. It wasn't a nice place, and as far as Izuku could tell, it was actually a downgrade from the last apartment. He looked at the stains on the wall and scratches on the floor. A flash of something coursed through his veins at the thought that he had a better apartment than the info broker. Izuku walked through the rooms, eyeing the chairs he saw. Most of them were crude and rickety-looking things, but there were a few that looked worthwhile. A small dark red armchair, and a tall blue wingback. There were a few ottomans and such scattered around, but Izuku wasn't sure if they would fit in the shopping cart he had stolen. He would make them fit. He's cleaning this place out. Going on an all-expenses-paid shopping spree. 5-finger discount. Whatever you called it, he was doing it. Izuku hissed, grabbing a small pink ottoman and heading back to the window, roughly dropping it down into the cart. The cart clanged, protesting the rough treatment, but it stayed where he had wedged it against the wall. Moving the red armchair took more effort, scuffing the floor as he dragged it towards the window. As soon as he lifted it, he paused, belatedly realizing that it was too big. He set the chair back down, forked tongue flicking out between his fangs as he rethought his actions. Lifting his right arm, Izuku transformed it to metal, immediately beginning to smash through the window frame and the surrounding wall. If it didn't fit, he would make it fit. He kicked away the loosened wood and drywall, not at all questioning the lack of insulation between the layers of the wall, and tossed down the chair, managing to land it perfectly atop the pink ottoman. The blue wingback took about the same amount of effort to move, if not more, but centimeter by centimeter, Izuku dragged and yanked it out the window, piling it into the cart with the rest. Grabbing a circular soft, cylindrical stool thing, Izuku wasn't sure what it was, only that it was a circle and it was soft and gray with a light blue trim around the top and bottom of it. Well, whatever it was, he tossed it in with the rest, grabbing the few throw pillows he saw and adding that in with his haul. His shopping cart full, Izuku wandered through the apartment, breaking all the light bulbs with metal fingers and seeing if there was anything he wanted. Entering the bedroom, he halted, his eye caught by a glass and crystal monster on the ceiling. It was ugly, unwieldy, and probably cost a fortune. He had to have it. Izuku climbed onto the bed, rolling his eyes at the attempted luxury of silk sheets before standing, reaching up and grazing the ceiling with his fingertips. So close. He looked around the room, gaze landing on the bedside table. Hopping off the bed, Izuku grabbed the table, standing with one foot on the edge of the bed and the other on the tabletop. He reached up again, fingers landing solidly against the base of the chandelier. Perfect. Pressing the tips of his right-handed fingers against the screws in the base, He hardened them into metal, his skin having formed into the indents of the screw. He twisted his finger slightly, the screw coming loose as he pulled his finger back before reattaching it against the head of the screw and repeating the action. He did the same for the next 5 screws, not caring how many minutes passed. He needed to have this chandelier. Along with stealing half of the furniture and leaving muddy footprints on the bed, it just felt like the ultimate fuck you. And destroying half the wall wasn't so bad either. Finally finished, he all but yanked the connecting wires out of place, the chandelier now safe in his hands. As he left the apartment through the hole he had created, he only had one thought. How about that for an animal in human skin? Durin knocked back his 3rd shot of whiskey, gesturing to the misty bartender for another. A purple mist-covered hand set down a bottle next to the still empty glass. A clear message of pour it yourself, trying to drown your sorrows. Drumming his fingers on the bar top, Durin said, unprompted, "My apartment just got robbed. Unfortunate." Hirajiri's voice was flat, any emotion it usually contained completely removed. It was obvious he truly did not care in the slightest about Durin's apartment. 3rd time this year, Durin quantified, freely giving unwanted information. That seems unreasonably high. Kurajiri said, politeness and idle curiosity the only things keeping him engaged in conversation. How does one get robbed 3 times in a single year? I keep moving, but it just keeps happening. Durin slapped his flat hand onto the bar top, irritation flaring. He growled, grabbing the bottle of whiskey and pouring another shot. Not like I can go to the police about it, either. Do you have any idea who it is? Oh, I know exactly who it is. Little bastard holds a grudge. Durin sneered, the expressionless face of that animal floating through his memory. Scorpion might have a human form, but he wasn't human in the ways that mattered. Shigaraki frowned, finally interested in the conversation. Why can't you simply stop him? Because he's the only maker of venom around. I buy from his go-to and sell at a markup. Too bad about the bastard cutting him out. Now the only thing Scorpion gives him are rumors, and rumors are meant to be spread. The villain slowly approached the bar, standing at its end. Can't you find someone else who can make venom? Why would you keep someone who hates you alive? Nope, and that's the worst part of all of this. Nobody other than Scorpion could make venom. It's an endogenous drug. Shigaraki cocked his head to the left slightly, scratching at his neck. What's that? He didn't like not knowing things. Hirajiri supplied the information readily, not even looking at Durin anymore. A little voice in the back of his head helpfully suggested that Durin deserved to be robbed at this point. It's a drug made within the body. Shigaraki crept closer, seating himself on the bar stool at the end. Durin set his shot glass down, his posture finally relaxed. The 1/4 bottle of whiskey had finally begun to work its way into his system. Did you know the human body actually produces its own version of morphine? It's in the saliva. He gestured to his own face, sticking out his tongue. Part of the reason you get the urge to lick an injury. He added, don't actually do that though. The human mouth has so much bacteria. Shigaraki sneered, acting as if he had never had that same urge. Gross. He turned back to Kurajiri, but still watched Durin from the corner of his eye. So venom is one of those sorts of drugs. Yeah, and it's a great high, like cocaine and heroin, mixed with the long-lasting frenzy of meth, but somehow smooth. Durin rolled his eyes at the young villain's look of disgusted confusion. Don't give me that look. Of course I had to try it, make sure it was worth selling. Kurajiri cocked his head to the side, the mist that covered him shifting inquisitively. Is it addictive? Not at all. And that's what makes it the perfect thing to those university students who just want to party. Shigaraki just shook his head. Maybe this Scorpion could be a future recruit. After all, the League of Villains would soon need as many followers and as much revenue as possible. Waking with your alarm is a myth. You wake up because of your alarm, groggy, and enraged from being yanked from sleep's tender embrace. At least, that's how Uraraka Ochako wakes up, her phone floating near the ceiling from her attempt to shut off her blaring alarm. Now it's blaring and bouncing around the ceiling. Steepling her fingers, she pressed her fingertips together and released her quirk. Her phone once again in the grip of gravity. It dropped down onto her bed, alarm still ringing and the time displayed on the screen. 8:45 a.m. Shut the hell up, she muttered as she finally silenced her alarm, rolling off her bed and catching herself before hitting the floor. Her foot caught on a pair of pants on the floor, nearly tripping her and knocking her down. Uffed, she staggered out of her tiny bedroom and into her living room kitchen combo. Her apartment warmed from the weak sunlight streaming through the windows, even as the glass fogged over from the mist that never seemed to burn off. No Man's Land was an oddly symbolic place, almost overly so at times. The leftovers in her fridge, however, were anything but symbolic. A dozen eggs and maybe 3 servings of leftover rice hardened slightly from its time in the cold. She had some of her lunch from the day before, lamb kofta that had been far more than Benu would serve to the customers, but that would only last so long. Did she have enough left to last until she was paid? She knew that her paychecks would last longer if she didn't send half of it back home to her parents, but she was just doing what she had set out to do. She wanted to give her parents a better life, so what if she had to skip a meal here and there? Her stomach growled in reply, making up her mind for her. Half the remaining kofta, a serving of rice, and 2 eggs. Uninspired, but it would be filling, at least. Wash it down with a glass of water from the sink, and be done with it. A knock at the door, and she checks her phone for the time. 9:32 a.m. Who the hell knocks on the door at 9:30 a.m.? They could be a murderer. Pulling a chef knife out from her knife block, she kept it by her side as she reached for the door handle. When she saw who was there and what they were holding, she wondered if she would have to use the knife anyways. Hey, Izuku stood in front of her door, a massive and hideous crystal and metal chandelier in his arms. There were streaks of white powder across his entire body, bits of broken glass and splinters of wood in his hair. He looked an absolute wreck. Let me in, Midoriya. Ochako adjusted her grip on her knife, keeping it at her side. What are you doing here? I don't know. Old man and his friend are passed out in the apartment, so... He trailed off, leaving Uraraka with more questions than before. But there was something about his tone. Izuku sounded lost, almost confused, but that wasn't possible, right? I just need... Can you let me in? Finally, opening the door all the way, Uraraka took a step back. Yeah, sure. Here, Izuku handed over the chandelier, not even blinking at the knife in his not friend's hand. This is for you. Struggling with the sudden weight, she paused before activating her quirk on the monstrosity. She turned back to Izuku. What the hell am I supposed to do with this? Izuku trudged into the apartment, brushing past Uraraka and her new chandelier. Old man says it's rude to not bring a gift. Where the hell did you even get this? Stole it, he said flatly, looking around and standing in the middle of the living room. He wandered over to the couch, debating if he should sit. Of course you did. Uraraka carefully set the monstrosity of crystal and metal on the couch, deactivating her quirk and wondering how much she could sell this for. What do you want? My dad thinks I should go to UA. Izuku leaned against the wall beside the couch, said I don't even need to be in the hero course. I think he just wants me to try and have some motivation in my life. Does he really? Yeah, I don't get it. Well, you're really nice, so maybe. I'm not. Izuku nearly choked on his next word, nice. Whenever someone said the word nice, he remembered a different voice. You're so nice, Mikumo. That's why you're my best friend. I'm not, he repeated, slumping heavily against the wall. But you are. Ochako put her knife back onto the kitchen counter, turning back to her neighbor. You brought me a freaking chandelier because you thought it would be a good gift. Izuku shook his head. No, I gave it to you because I stole it without needing it and didn't know how to get rid of it. He didn't get it for Uraraka, he just didn't want Jiren to have it. At least, that's what he had to keep telling himself. Living the way he did now, it was just easier to tell himself that. Ochako sighed, rubbing her temples. For someone with no emotion, Izuku sure required a lot of emotional commitment and energy. Why did you come over? I wanted to ask if... He paused, already knowing the answer. You would be a good hero. You'd be better than Endeavor. You could be a hero. Let's be heroes. If you think I should be a hero. Uraraka frowned, thinking over the wording. Not could, but should. Do you want to be a hero? No, I don't. I don't know. I used to. Izuku sighed, leaning back against the wall, having slid down to the floor steadily. He clenched his fist, looking at the back of a hand that wasn't supposed to be his. He closed his eyes, shrugging with one shoulder. But, I don't want anything anymore. Is it because you don't feel anything? Izuku nodded, explaining in as much depth as he could. No feelings means no motivation. He opened his uncovered eye, looking his not friend in the eye. It's something. I should feel conflicted, knowing that I should be feeling certain things, but I don't. I should feel troubled, or fearful, concerned, but none of those emotions are available to me. He shrugged, folding his hands behind his head and lacing his fingers. So, I just don't. Nothing was said for seconds that seemed to be minutes that seemed to be hours. The buzz of electric noise from the telephone lines, and the sound of cars a few streets away. The background noise of no man's land filtered through the windows and wall. But then again, the neighborhood was never truly quiet. But Ochako cut through the constant murmur, a question at the ready. Even if you don't want to be a hero, would you? She trailed off, suddenly nervous even though she knew Midoriya wouldn't judge her. He wasn't capable of that. Izuku looked over. What? Train with me, she said, her voice shaking slightly. She balled one of her hands into a fist, not even knowing if she was doing that right. I want to be a hero, and I know that I'm not ready. There are only 10 months until the UA entrance exam. UA? Huh? Why did everyone want to go to UA? Was it really that good of a school? Yes. Ochako looked towards Izuku with near desperation, knowing he might be her only chance to get help. I want to be a hero and give my parents an easy life. Will you help me? Fine, sure. Izuku snorted. He could recognize manipulation when he saw it. Dabai and Uraraka seemed to have the same plan to try and get him to do something. Maybe not being a hero, but at least getting his life back in motion. If he becomes a hero along the way, that's not important. Izuku grunted as he pushed himself into a standing position. Walking into the kitchen and opening the fridge, he raised an eyebrow, closing the door immediately. He turned back to Uraraka, taking in underdeveloped muscles and unbalanced posture. This was going to be a lot of work. There's a few warehouses around here that nobody uses. Well, nobody except gangs that didn't want to get on Izuku's bad side. All he had to do was show up and throw a few glares around, and maybe a fireball or two. Just know that this won't be easy. Right, I'll do anything to become a hero. There was an air of desperation that sends a spike of horror through Izuku's brain. Won't you be my hero? Don't say that. Izuku narrowed his eye, forked tongue flicking as he hissed out his next words. He bared his fangs. Never say that, because someone will try to take advantage of it. He glared continuously until Uraraka nodded, before he turned to go, one hand on the doorknob. I'll get everything set up. I'll text you the location when it's ready. Izuku left, door slamming shut behind him as he thudded his way down the stairs, pulling out his wallet and counting his cash, wondering if he had enough money to buy groceries for one more person. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.